Good afternoon, good evening, welcome, good morning. We are here for our second report, Return to Form, at the London Film Festival. We have been in and out of the quite ghastly Picture House Central in Piccadilly Circus, London's glamorous Piccadilly Circus. We are joined, as is often the case, by George MacBeth, friend of the show, our Berlin correspondent here in London. And we've seen many films with George, which we will discuss at length today. How are you guys finding the festival so far?
Yeah, I've hit that sort of like slow, lazy river, phase of the festival, I think now, which is like, it's, the first is like a sense of thrill and excitement and possibility. And now you hit the kind of like 3, 4, 5 day and you just kind of, an automaton, I think, in a way. It's just film.
So lacking much festivity, I think.
We don't sound very festive, do we, actually? We sound a bit of a low
it's just
air,
the prizes are sort of meaningless. I mean, the films have all shown somewhere else. So we're just catching up. We're playing catch up.
Except the British films. The only debuts are British films, we've
not seen any British films.
As we'll discuss later.
You've seen one.
I've seen
massively
one
few British films.
Which I'll discuss.
Films that are British, actually.
Yes, well, that was in our previous episode. If you're just watching this, we discussed in our previous episode British short films that we thought were bad. That clip has been very, very popular, although no one will admit it in public. And we also reviewed Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell.
Great.
What was the other stuff we reviewed?
Corrieder's Monster.
Catherine Breillat's
Last Summer.
And much else. Despite this slightly downbeat tone, we are going to kick off this podcast reviewing.
Just need the coffee to kick in my phone.
Let's take a little sip as well. Let's do a bump and then.
Rustle those ice cubes. It's low-key summer in this October day. It's 25 degrees. You'll sort of see the light, warm light on our faces. If you're watching this on video, we're now recording these sometimes. We are going to brighten up our moods by discussing what, for many of us, I think was the best film of the year, possibly.
Wow. Yeah, possibly.
Front load it with that. Radu Jude, Do Not Expect the End of the World.
Do not expect too much from
the end of the world.
Title purloined from some Polish poet.
George,
do you remember the name?
You saw this particularly recently for the second time. Could you give us a quick summary of this complex and interesting film?
Yeah, I can try and be as succinct. It's quite a complex structure. So it's bipartite, and anybody who saw his previous film so actually this film is the third, basically, in a loose trilogy that began with We Will Not Go Down in History. Do not think we will.
God, every title of a Radu Jude film is a long sentence.
It's unwieldy.
It's unwieldy. So the title of that film is I Do Not Care
if we go down in history
as barbarians, which was what a politician once said after doing something rather barbaric.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then this was followed by Bad Luck Banging or Loony Porn, another
very popular title,
unwieldy one.
His lockdown film.
Yeah, and this is the third one. And loosely, thematically, and formally clustered together. I mean, especially compared to his other films, which involved this period drama aphorism.
They deal with contentious political issues in a sort of polyform fashion.
Yeah, and they're also, as I was remarking on the tube on the way here and they're kind of city symphonies to kind of paeans to Bucharest itself as this like chaotic, rambunctious.
He's not necessarily
interested. Space.
He's interested in these places of excessive interconnection, overlap, and which is predominantly urban space,
right?
And urban structures, urban institutions.
So this is the end. This is a kind of capstone to this trilogy, and like the others, it's kind of composed of these formally distinct parts. And the first part of the film is essentially
a road movie.
It's a road movie, and you're going into the hidden abode of production for the second part of the film. So the whole film is essentially an exercise in showing you how a propaganda film is made, and it's a meditation on the status of how an idea is kind of compromised and diluted by, in one case, political totalitarian oversight, which is a Ceausescu propaganda film.
Just to put us in the mind of the viewer.
Yes,
we follow in black and white footage. We follow a woman a very stressed, underslept woman driving around Bucharest, driving around Romania, a production
She's a
assistant,
production manager
trying to find people who have had workplace injuries, who would be prepared to talk about their workplace injuries in a film which promotes health and safety. And she gradually finds that many of these people suffered their injuries as a result of negligence of the company she works
and
rather than their own fault.
It's a classic structure. It's like Blues Brothers or something.
Yeah, so the difference here is obviously they're not generic workplace accidents. These are employees of a particular company that she's been hired by to produce a piece of
It's an Austrian furniture manufacturer.
Yeah, an Austrian furniture manufacturer, and she's basically been, tasked with producing a piece of, I suppose it's like a workplace video, so it's not designed for external kind of consumption. It's for other employees.
But it's sort of meant to cover their back in a certain kind of way. Yeah.
But in the process, discovers that it's corporate negligence that's led to that. Even though the official narrative is that they have wounded come to injure themselves through their own foolishness or drunkenness in one case, or accusations of drunkenness. So it's this, And
this woman is sort of harried and stressed, but also. She has a wicked spirit, and she is also a viral TikToker. She posts using a filter that makes her look like a sort of bald, bearded man.
Monobrowed. Yeah.
The monobrow. She inhabits the character of Babita, which the actress continues to inhabit in the social media account of the film, which you can follow. I can't remember the app. Do not expect too much, or whatever. Yep. She posts these kind of misogynistic rants in the character of Babita.
It's a sort of Bakhtinian like Billingsgate. It's just like complete torrential obscenity and vulgarity of the most like exciting like verbal
What's the one about
dexterity.
The Queen? So this takes place during the death of the Queen. The British Queen.
I mean everything that actually is happening around the production seeps into the production. I mean Godard's death is remarked upon, Ukraine war is remarked upon, but not with a kind of bid or a nod towards topicality. Just like the film is so ultra contemporary in both its.
It's this kind of it's a browser tab experience or a feed almost.
Exactly.
Not to be too sort of activistic, but
I just remembered another aspect of the film. The footage of her in the car is intercut with footage from a 1970s or 80s Romanian film
called Angela Moves On.
Starring
Ceausescu funded propaganda video about a sort of woman taxi driver in Bucharest in the 70s.
And actually our production assistant is also called Angela.
Yes, and also the woman who plays Angela in that film then appears.
So you see, it's not so easy to give a succinct appraisal of this film.
It's a very faceted thing, and it's to invoke Bakhtin. It's polyvocal in lots of ways. It really is in a truest sense, and I think. So we've got that narrative there, the second half of the film. So the film's kind of in parts, stages basically, as we kind of move towards the actual shooting of this. Her job is to kind of herd the cats of these sort of injured parties, to bring them together, to convince them to perform in the film, to then shoot them. In between that, we've got these kind of these derives, which are her TikTok videos. Sometimes we're inside the video, sometimes we see her shooting them, and it's quite funny to see.
And it should be said that we go from this amazing high grain black and white.
I think she's on 16, or it looks like it.
And she's
quite grainy, isn't it? It's nice.
Yeah, and I mean, you remarked before on a kind of like thoughtlessly made 16mm film that you'd seen.
By Ben Hecking.
Exactly. Whereas this was it was done in order to exploit the mediums to its fullest. I mean, she wears this mirrored dress as well, which
this shine,
which creates this kind of wonderful mirror ball fish skin effect.
And you don't realize it's kind of this lost effect in a way. I think there's a kind of visual joke there, because when we see her in black and white, it's only when we see her in color that we realize this dress is this kind of like an oil slick of shimmering shades. But we see her in the car, and it's just
club soda.
It's quite hard to tell. But I think there's also another narrative there, talking about transit, speed and death and velocity. It's got this kind of Virilio edge to it, which is that there's a bit where we see she remarks casually
oh god, it's so good.
She said this is one of the most dangerous roads in Europe, while she's driving a character we'll talk about in a moment, Nina Hoss's character from the airport. She says this is the most dangerous road in Europe. I think she says 3,000 people will die here every year or something in road accidents. It's not that many, but it's quite a lot. And then we get this film where I guess, a structural film where Radu Jude just shoots the tombstones, these kind of
these
roadside
crosses,
memorials.
They're not, they're sort of memorials in just a cross.
And it's basically...
And they're very different kinds of crosses that would denote
different interpretations of
or different class positions of the families who
some of them is like a rusty little cross, some of them are like a proper photograph with a bit of marble.
But each one is about 4 seconds, and it is, I think it's very much a cute nod to like Greenaway's Vertical Features remake. I mean, that's what
who minds if it is or it isn't. Yes.
No, I think it very much is like the way it's staged and mannered and all the rest of it. But also, I thought this was so audacious. Seeing this on the second time as well, because
it departs and then just returns.
Yeah,
it's like amazing.
It comes back,
and it's just intuitive. It's like a series of thoughts, and it is like you say, like a browser, not in a kind of crude, obvious way, but it does have this like browser tab way of moving between different forms and ideas.
And it's not doing the literal thing of something like Camille Onrose, which I like, but there's like gross fatigue,
where all the windows
pioneered the mode.
That's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like that.
Yeah,
and I think there's something about it kind of follows the distracted, always on thread of thought, I think, in some ways. So it's natural that if someone mentions this, it's almost like the brain would look it up and then browse through photographs on a browser or something. This kind of follows this kind of quite organic river approach to thought in terms of how the film is structured. It doesn't feel like it makes sense, but it makes sense in terms of just this.
But there is a total clarity of purpose,
and it adds a weight to the themes of the film, because it invokes, like, we're talking about workplace tragedy, we're talking about accidents. It kind of slots in without being too heavy-handed. I mean, this isn't a film. This is a film that has it's full of contradictions. It's full of quite sort of aggressive. I suppose it's encapsulated perfectly by these people are calling them Andrew Tate style TikToks, because she mentions Andrew Tate at one point. But the way that she uses this problematic misogynist TikTok personality almost as a way to kind of speak her anger and her frustration in this situation where she constantly has, as a production assistant, she constantly has to be amenable to everyone and polite. There's this amazing scene with Nina Hoss character. Nina Hoss doing an extraordinary job in this cameo as a very icy kind of senior executive at this company who's being driven around by the central character. And who says, it makes this performative attempt to kind of glean a bit of information about the protagonist's life as a worker, and she confides these like various things about how difficult it is to do her job, and then says, but I'm on this job, you don't have to work those kinds of hours.
Just 8 hours on this job.
This job is fine,
which we know to be untrue.
So there's various moments at which her she always has to be amenable to everyone, and then she has this amazing sort of offshoot, out where she this channel where she can kind of pour out her frustration in a different character that is like viewed as very anti-woke or whatever, very problematic. But then there's this like glorious naughty pleasure at seeing her inhabit this character. It was a very nice touch.
And I think that there's something very libidinally free for her to do this. And it's funny when we see her, she has a kind of short cig break or something on the shoot, and we see her in the background with the camera just yelling, and we hear it from a distance. So we see, it's kind of become a trope of videos. It's kind of very Brad Trammell story recap, watching videos of people recording TikToks in the street, and it's quite alienating and quite peculiar. And he kind of inhabits that. So what he does is he inhabits this kind of modernity that as refracted through various positions of seeing, of encountering.
He also doesn't maintain
with a spectator in loads of different situations and from loads of different vantages.
Yeah, exactly. Angles, it's pointillist and even cubist in a way. But like the point is that he is genuinely. It's apparent that this is somebody who consumes digital media and understands.
He's not some wacky boomer.
Well, I mean, and generationally speaking, he sort of is. But
Gen X, surely.
Yeah, okay, true. But he's he clearly understands
he's probably the same age as Eminem or something.
The power and the force of like a banging TikTok. And he's actually remarked in plenty of interviews upon at what point is there going to be a TikToking competition for various different things, or like a TikTok compilation. But this like the critical distance that's kind of needed for a respectable filmmaker to regard all this with slight contempt. And we were talking about the moments that you see even incredible, intelligent films where it'll be like, oh, this is going viral.
Yeah.
And everybody has to,
any film set in the present sort of feels it has a weird obligation to acknowledge like virality of contemporary culture in this
without it being inhabited. And here it's actually inhabited because the content is generated. It's the sort of thing that would genuinely
because it's formal, because it has a formal. It has a formal.
I think there's a way as well that a lot of these
like
art house more prestigious films don't know how to integrate that technology. They can't find a way to get a fingerhold on technology. And what Radu Jude does is finds interesting ways to use, I suppose, modern forms or hyper-modern forms of communication like TikTok and integrate them quite interestingly in Zoom calls and things like that. So there's two very amazing kind of Zoom calls in this film. There's one, she calls a guy who she's supposed to be interviewing for this film and he's gone fishing. So they managed to get him on, mobile phone or something. They call and she's doing, she's got the laptop and she's watching it. And because it's shot in black and white and because it's quite low fidelity, it's quite low definition, he's got a kind of fake space background. So he's kind of this floating head in space, and because it's very, I suppose, defamiliarizing to see something we know so well shot in this kind of grainy black and white, and it's an incredible way to, and we still have little bits of the tooltips in the screen, but it has this amazing kind of auratic quality about it. And it's like you're seeing it for the first time. We also see this scene later where Nina Hoss is calling in from Austria before she flies to Romania.
Against this glass panel.
We've got this huge head above this table. So it's very it's almost like kind of Wizard of Oz in a way. And she's kind of this Wizard of Oz character floating above this table, again in stark black and white. Again, very unsettling and defamiliarizing.
And a beautiful moment where the CEO of the company is scheduled to join the Zoom call. He joins it. He doesn't even say hello to anyone. He just says one word, emotion, and then closes off the Zoom and leaves.
The complete just asinine nature of
it
modern
really,
capital.
I think it does nail the neoliberal hell we're living through in a particular way that that a lot of films try to and don't achieve. I think it with a sense of fun and joy.
Right, because it's genuinely a dialectical film, I think. In everything, in terms of the attitude of he's a Romanian filmmaker reflecting in part on the kind of post-communist condition of hyper nightmarish urbanism, that everybody's talking about the traffic, the working conditions are disastrous, and in some ways then the propaganda film of Angela Moves On becomes this it's actually kind of halcyon moment of
it remains a propaganda film.
It remains a propaganda film, but we are also, by the status of the kind of contemporary film, seduced into finding this calm.
It's very meditative, and there's no traffic.
Right. And especially because the way he plays with the footage and slows it down. But then, as a counterpoint to this, the kind of dialectical edge of this moment is that he zooms in on the various people in the backdrop who are bystanders by and large, they're extras, and I think it's quite subtle what he's doing with the footage here. I think he's trying to tease out, to pass out from this official propaganda film the moments that it can't quite conceal, the suffering, the trauma, all the rest of it.
Yeah, or just even real life, because those scenes might be just someone with their bag of shopping, with their mouth slightly
who's
ajar,
to stumble into the frame.
So he kind of slows the footage down, and obviously the audio track also slows down. We get this kind of
sometimes the audio track cuts out completely. Yeah.
The other element I liked was, this, again, it had this kind of Godard weekend slapstick element to it, which was, these sort of, they're not Deliveroo cyclists, they're like Volt or something, or whatever the company is in large parts.
He actually cameos himself as a Glovo driver in the lobby of the Deloitte building. He's in the back, and he gets stuck in the elevator.
So there's lots of moments that are quite, again, it's one of these kind of symptomatic elements of modern capital. But
is that where they have the Fayum portrait on the wall?
And the Kenneth Goldsmith copy of Kenneth Goldsmith's Capital.
Very good. But so we have these intrusions.
That
of
one
kind
was
of
lost on the audience at BFI NFT1, I'm afraid.
Everyone's applauding like a seal. Yeah. I mean, but he has these. So we have these cyclists going over. She goes to a cemetery to go to visit her dad's grave.
Oh yes, and there's this thing about the plots of they want to build something on these graves.
Luxury housing.
So they're building an apartment condo adjacent, and so she goes to the Deloitte offices to kind of work this through, and they're like, well, they don't want to have a view over your grave, but we're going to rebury your grandmother, and we've checked, and it's all above board religiously.
It's fine to do. So it's not okay with me that you're moving the mortal remains.
And she's only been buried 5 months ago or something.
It's amazing.
It has exhumed again.
Not only in the editing style, but also just narratively, it's so collage-like.
It's truly like Rabelaisian, and like everything that is high is brought low, right? Like basically, there is nothing that cannot be
Rabelaisian. This is your reference for
this is Bakhtin.
This is
yeah.
Okay, you have to explain
but
it.
here, it's like
you said this for Triangle of Sadness. It was Rabelaisian.
That was like attempting to be so, but then actually by having this moralistic third act.
So the book that listeners should read is
Rabelaisian as well by Bakhtin. I think so. I mean, at least to get a handle on this. But I think at the same time, and this is what I said when I reviewed it, everybody reaches for Godard, but actually I think he's truly the heir to like Kluger in terms of his understanding of hybridity and how to stitch together like multiple types of...
The Power of Emotion by Kluger springs to mind, I think.
This one, but also
Germany in Autumn,
I mean, if you count Germany in Autumn as a Kluger film, which we do, then I think
it's a Kluger project primarily, isn't it?
Yeah, but imagine if Kluger made comedies.
Yeah,
right.
Well, there is a huge element of comedy to Germany in Autumn.
I think top is kind of funny, but I think there's
Germany in Autumn is full of moments of satire. I mean, when they're debating how to like prefix the Antigone production, that's a very Judean scene actually.
But anyway,
I'm sure he's seen that.
But my point was, we've got this talking about Rabelais and kind of like inverting the high and the low. You've got this cemetery, which is a kind of somber place of reflection and mourning, and we've got these cyclists, these kind of delivery cyclists crossing constantly, going through the cemetery for God knows what reason, and the cemetery itself has this
the website.
It's called cemetery.com on this massive wall, and it's playing quite schmaltzy funeral dirge music into the over the top of the cemetery.
And while she's there, she gets a kind of a cold call from an insurance agent as well.
Yeah, there's no space that is free from the clutches of kind of...
which also makes it a bit Fellini-esque, a bit like kind of German, like nobody has any space to think in this world. And in this world, these are I mean, it's not...
He reproduces the modern world exactly by not trying to... He's not trying to reflect on the modern world. He's just created a diorama.
Or does he do what she says Babita is doing, which is to like intensify all of its existing, and she's like, when she says, "I'm Charlie fucking Hebdo," like this.
I think it totally like just to reflect back on his career, and I did enjoy. So like structurally, this has similarities with I Do Not Care If We Go Down History as Barbarians, in that it leads up to a performance, to a project.
So it's the hidden about the production and the production itself.
And in the case of, it's quite short in Barbarians, the actual production, but in this, it's probably the last half hour of the film. It's just a single shot of them trying to film this video and the various obstacles, and backroom, production chat that is extremely funny and weird.
And to try and get, because they're not quite happy with his narrative, because they're basically slicing away his account until it suits the corporate narrative. So they end up shooting, and it goes from day to night. It begins to rain, so they have to get umbrellas out.
So there's like the moral and like practical kind of obstacles keep getting invading.
And the intent to have this kind of authentic story. As they realize it casts a bad light on the company, what we end up with is basically nothing. We end up with a kind of pointless him going
nothing, because he's holding signs that will be.
He's not allowed to talk, is he? And say, it's easy if you don't talk, and we just hold up.
And
signs.
They say it's going to be like Subterranean Homesick Blues.
Yeah, because they eventually have empty boards. And he's like, we can just add it in post. We can just put the text over.
So then he can just be saying.
He's lost complete control over his own narrative, which is perfect.
It's beautiful. It's like absurdist, but it hits just the right note of absurdity in it, and it's also nice to watch something so. Like it's almost like kind of like a breath of fresh air, weirdly, to have all this jumping around between spaces, and then suddenly then you're just like still locked off shot, same location.
Actually, the best joke is unless I've misremembered this, is at the end when they shoot at the site where he was paralyzed. So because a sort of old rusty road gate thing kind of fell on his head.
He didn't see.
They didn't see, and they blame it on him because he wasn't wearing a helmet. But when they're there, the same bar is still there, hasn't been replaced. So they have to kind of lift it and move out the way, because they're like, oh shit, this is still.
And then he gestures towards the bar that isn't there anymore.
It's just so good, and there's these little, it's full of like little nested, I guess, Easter eggs in a way. But he's not doing it just. They're all part of this kind of the warp and weft of his critique.
If you watch, I mean, I'd like to see Bad Luck Banging again, but like Bad Luck Banging has in a way quite a satisfying discreteness in the sense of things being divided. Between the sections, but it's so much more exciting the way that this film like imbricates all the elements together. And I really have, when I saw, it's just beautiful when a director like makes good on their failings in a previous work. It just feels, because there was so much potential in Bad Luck Banging, and there were moments of it that were really exciting, but But yeah, it had a very rigid kind of 3-part structure, and everything was had even like an alphabet where everything was like separated out. And this film does away with that.
It was too schematic, and
completely does away with that, and follows its own intuitions editing wise, and that's what makes it formally really engaging, because it's following its own intuition about what should come next and what feels.
It's a termite film. Right. It's digging into the status of its own formal problems as it's presenting itself, and then it's finding ingenious ways to resolve them, and that's enough. That's sufficient to make something which is as good as a fucking great TikTok.
Yes. What can a film really be than a great TikTok?
Yeah. So we highly recommend.
It's got the return to form stamp of approval.
Return to form. Yeah. We love the new Radu Jude film. Do not expect too much of The End of the World.
But expect a lot from Radu Jude.
Expect a lot from the rest of his career. It seems like he has now really, really arrived as director. It will be distributed in the UK, which is great news. I can't remember who the distributor is actually, but it's very good. It's quite long, but it certainly earns
date night potential. Take your hinge date to go and see.
You will laugh.
Radu Jude.
You will cry.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to what is from the best film of the festival so far to the most talked about film, probably.
Are we talking about Marty Scorsese?
We're talking about Martin Scorsese, who gave a talk at the Royal Festival Hall, is sort of guest of honor of this festival, the most high profile. Owen, you've seen The Irishman, you've seen a few of the recent Scorsese films.
I feel
where do you feel
immersed in the Scorsese
Where do you feel his career has been coming up to this new film, The Killers of the Flower Moon?
Well, he's kind of established himself as this great historicist of American, I guess, filmic tradition. So he's doing kind of a melodrama. Like I was saying to you when we were walking to Pratt, there's a sense in which he's continuing a tradition of American golden age melodrama, often crime narratives, fallen people. But what he's done is kind of turbocharged it to 11 and fed it through the kind of prospectus of, the modern thriller, sort of like he's getting his rocks. He's basically having his cake and eating it by doing the kind of Hollywood film that he's so critical about on Twitter and in his videos. He is still part of that Hollywood industrial complex in so many ways. Not only with the super high production values, the kind of A-list talent he works with. Yeah. And I think the conversation we often had is that he, one of the great reasons we should take our hats off to somebody like Scorsese is because of the World Cinema Project or the World Cinema Foundation. So he's been responsible,
invaluable work
for restoring loads of lost films, or at least kind of not rediscovering them, but kind of restoring older films that are in desperate need of restoration, and then distributing them, and I think widening access to films that are instrumental. And our question is, for a man who is so immersed in the kind of great tradition, so a film like Peugeot's Limité, all these really like beautifully avant-garde films.
Tuki, which I don't think was really part of the conversation in the way it is now. Yeah. Loads of great Polish films.
So for somebody who is so sort of involved in the kind of the grammar and syntax of beautiful, experimentally tinged film, does it feed through to his filmmaking? And that was the question we went in with. Because of Family, I feel like there's a sense in which there are moments of Killers of the Flower Moon, which is a story. It's basically a story of capital. It's kind of doing. Yeah. It's basically.
Shall I give a quick summary of the?
Yeah, my summary is There Will Be Blood with a land acknowledgement.
Yeah,
that's but you might.
True. So it's based on a novel of the same name that came out in 2017, and it is based on they're both based on real events that happened in Osage County in Oklahoma, I believe. Basically,
which is an Indian reservation,
Native American Indian reservation of the Osage people. These people, at this point in history, which is the 1920s, by dint of being the first people on the land, are somewhat wealthy because of the oil on the land.
Have been discovered.
The oil rights have been discovered, and there are various white people. White American people
there,
who are quite keen on the value of this oil, and some murders start to happen, which are suspiciously convenient,
predictable
in terms of who gets the money afterwards. Lots of white Americans are marrying into full-blooded Osage families. Some of these romances are very genuine romances, it seems. Leonardo DiCaprio, the protagonist, is taken under the wing of his uncle Bill Hale.
King Hale,
he has to call him. Who sort of runs the show.
Played by Robert De
Niro. He has these weird moments where he suddenly gets a bit Italian, but never mind. It's like suddenly becomes Goodfellas and then doesn't.
This is Badfellas.
Yeah. It's Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a sort of complex character.
He's trying to efface himself as Leonardo DiCaprio, the actor, and only succeeding to an extent because he's playing. You know, he usually plays the character who's got a. He has played naive characters in the past. You know, if you look at like Gangs of New York, which I think is a great film personally, but so he's kind of readopting this kind of slightly naive character.
Or The Beach also now.
Beach is good actually. Beach is good, but I mean
he's a bit of a dolt then.
Yeah, he's a bit of a dolt, and he's kind of playing this kind of like slightly naive kind of I guess
perfect foil to carry out the dirty work of De Niro's character.
He's
but he doesn't
basically
realize
being manipulated by his uncle because he believes that his uncle could do no wrong, and his uncle presents himself as the perfect kind of liberal, the progressive character. He's learnt the Osage language. He calls these people his friends. He's he's kind of like obsequious, and he's very kind of like deferential to Osage, culture in a way that is immediately suspicious to anyone with a gram of sense. But obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is just reads it on surface level. But this is a good man. His uncle's a good man, and then slowly begins to do his uncle's bidding, which most of the time means arranging the murder of these various women, so that the money
and men sometimes, but mostly the wives.
Mostly the wives. So I mean, that's the story. I mean, my feeling was the story was. It had to be neat, so we had
to have a pretty good story. Yeah,
it's a kind of
As it unfolds, it does feel somewhat literary in the sense that like it moves extremely quickly through these very momentous events.
Yeah,
like all the murders, you barely get to know people before they get taken off, and it's very much about the sweeping history. This is happening over several years. People, babies are born.
I think it goes up to 1937. Or
yeah,
so, yeah.
And then there's like a coda at the end that sort of... Anyway, we'll get to the coda later. I feel like we could almost copy and paste some of my thoughts about Priscilla in terms of the formal thing, but I'll say it anyway. This film is not, for the most part, interestingly made. It looks like TV. It's the production design is extremely intricate in a way that I'm sure makes the production designing art directing department feel really proud of how accurate it all was, but it doesn't it doesn't interest me at all.
Yeah, the verisimilitude is kind of pointless because nobody who was alive then is live now. The aims of verisimilitude are kind of lost.
And it doesn't have the basically I think we were saying this about what were we saying this about? I often say it about Aguirre, Wrath of God, but we were saying about a different film.
Films that kind of only partially try and they reimagine the past in a slightly kind of defamiliarizing way.
If you're doing period drama, I think we need muck. We need to really feel horrible and dirty.
What were we talking about? There was a film we really pulled up that was good about this. Was it on a recent? Was it? Oh, it was Pasolini.
Medea. That is yet to come out, but Tank TV, we did a talk with Tank TV about Medea, which is a period drama that has proper frantic muck and difficulty,
and it also kind of has a kind of intentionally
but also hits the camera.
I'd
say it's true of all of Pasolini's period
dramas. But Pasolini was very good at this.
He creates a kind of he doesn't create perfect verisimilitude of the past. He reimagines it through something that's both sparser and kind of more exaggerated in a way.
Look, without having seen the Scorsese, this is especially kind of post Mad Men. You remember where the excitement of they got the exact type of Bic that would have been used in 1964 to have on Draper's desk, even if he didn't fucking use it, right? There's addiction to it, the totally perfect,
and you get these
recreation.
And what is it
it's
about?
a sort of reality hunger. It's like a fear of fiction, which is
why does this bother us so much? Because it bothers me a lot, but I don't know why. It's like watching the perfectness and just being like,
well, it's people for whom people for whom continuity and a total absence of continuity error is the imprimatur of good filmmaking. So they're not
it's not getting any
interest
goofs.
or inventiveness or anything else isn't optional, but as long as
Well, the grammar of film, and it applies of modern prestige filmmaking, is that authenticity. I really felt this character's sadness. I really felt that these characters' clothes were ones he wore. You sometimes see these interviews with actors and they go, "Oh yeah, I got these traditional hobnail boots and I used to wear them around the house, when I go shopping."
But it's the same madness that results in something like Tao, which is actually an interesting project because it kind of thematizes, this kind of giant Stalinist
totalitarian project.
But there's a similar thing going into the endless cottage industry of American prestige films.
Did many people see Dark? Because I watched one of the Dark films.
I watched 3 of them. I watched Christine
What's the
and Natasha.
director of Doubt?
There's 2 people. There's a production designer and there's
This is like
woman
an
and a man.
insane sort of almost reality TV style Russian film.
Yeah, it was
Anyway.
a Stalinist laugh, essentially.
They created a gigantic factory, and it pursued authenticity to a point of kind of tyrannical
Ilya
excess.
Krasnok.
So what I want to say about this Scorsese film before we get too sidetracked is that there's a sort of phenomenon of the oneer, which like YouTube video essays are fond of celebrating, where a long shot takes in a huge amount of action. Now there aren't actually any oneers in Killers of the Flower Moon, but I feel like the film
There's halfers.
Yeah, there are some long sweeping shots, but this film takes on the film's stylistic style. The film style takes on board the logic of the oneer, which is like it's not about the composition, it's about like the breadth of content that you can kind of cram into one shot.
Now we're looking at this. Now we're moving.
Now we're moving to this. Look at all the stuff. Look at the big spread that I put on for you.
It's like a Bayeux
It's a
tapestry.
banquet. Yeah.
It's like vol-au-vents. It's like that. This is the style of filmmaking that just makes sure you know
It's
that
Viscontian,
we've got
no?
Leopard. You mean?
Yeah.
No, I mean like Ludwig. I mean like real kind of Baroque late day Visconti.
Baroque is really in the water at the moment, isn't it? But I think you're right.
These Baroque allegations.
Baroque allegations. That's Scorsese. But yeah, you're right. So there's times where there are flickers in this film where there is a slightly interesting use of composition and framing, and it's much more interesting when there's only one figure, maybe 2 figures or 3 in a shot, and so you get these. At the beginning, or when he's treating these bodies that are being discovered, when he first shoots the oil as it's bubbling through this cracked mud, this is all in the first 5 minutes. You're like, ooh, this is actually visually quite interesting. And there's a kind of gauzy blur to how it's shot. And we get these there's scenes that look like the opening of Kurosawa's Ran, when his characters are shot against this grassland, very vibrant grass. Characters kind of down the bottom third, and there's a big swell of the angle and the blocking is just very, very interesting. But then, the film just decides to submerge the kind of those formal things and go, okay, the what matters now is the story and the pace of the story. So it goes out the window, these kind of concerns about how you might interestingly frame the interrogations that happen or the murders that happen. We get this kind of like slightly Tarantino-esque thing where someone will refer to a thing.
It's very Tarantino, actually.
I took out that guy, and then we'll get the shot. We'll go back in time and see someone go back.
So annoying, but it's not schlocky enough. Like it's like Tarantino. I'd be prepared to watch an Osage Django Unchained style film because that period detail is serving a kind of genre. Like it's not my favorite kind of film, but like that sort of thing makes sense, and then it slips into it when you have like Robert De Niro being like, "You should have shot him in the front of the face, not the back of the face." You like, and then everyone laughs because it's funny, but it's like, you should lean into that a bit more actually, because that's the only register in which this period accuracy is really like worthwhile.
These flashbacks are very irritating.
You're not creating that many intimate moments. Although I think the relationship between Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone's character, the woman,
because they have a real true romance.
That works quite well. I think Leonardo DiCaprio's journey as the character, beyond the fact that he just always annoyingly looks like Leo and it distracts me a bit, I think he does a pretty good job of going that journey. The final half hour to hour of the film, I found actually really engaging, and it
becomes a courtroom drama.
Like
quite a competently made one.
And it's not too courtroomy, right? It's not too like dialogue heavy. Like it rests like his final dilemma of like, whether he dobs everyone in, whether he should testify or not.
Because he has the option to be a rat, basically.
Exactly, and he has to weigh up like. And then this amazing scene, this is a bit of a spoiler, but this amazing scene where like he sort of basically admits to her, I did all these killings, but I've decided that it was a terrible idea and I'm testifying.
I'm sorry.
I'm really sorry. And she's like, okay, and she obviously really loves him, but then she's like, wait a minute, what were you feeding me? Like when this diabetes medicine, like what was actually
he was doping her up, basically.
And it was clear that he was being instructed, and she can take him killing all her friends and all her family,
her literal sisters,
but when she realizes that actually he was like stupid and evil enough or whatever to it's up for question whether he's evil or not. He just seems to be kind of naive.
He's not like a sort of Machiavellian or Iago character. He's a bit of a dimwit, probably sincere to a fault, where he believes everything his uncle would tell him to do is worthy and it's in best interest of the community, because he says
this stuff all worked. I felt what didn't work was Scorsese's sense of, and we'll talk a little bit about sort of savior complexes when we talk about Steve McQueen later. But
yes, we will.
But there was a bit of a savior complex, and I know that it's very fraught politics, and I totally understand the impulse of people in North America to want to do the right thing with regards to the historic injustices. But the way he uses sort of historical footage or like faked historical footage. Some of it's real actually, but it's weird. It's a weird like there's a shot that's black and white, then fades into color. It really
it's
corny.
very corny, and it's a little bit sped up, isn't it?
Yeah, he sort of uses this. He uses this in order to furnish the film with a kind of political legitimacy, and you can tell that he's kind of trying to have it both ways. He's trying to do like a mucky, bloody thriller, but then also it's like woke. It tells an important story.
Yeah, it's kind of it is King Hale's character in a way. Scorsese is kind of him. He's almost a sent up version of him that would do murder. And he said, instead of doing murder, I'm making a landing lodgement film. Because it's very self-rewarding, and there's very great kind of ethnographic filmmaking, I suppose, about these Osage ceremonies and communities, and it's quite nice and interesting to watch. These subtitles and people talking in their language, and it's quite interesting. Just chatting about normal stuff. But it's kind of self-congratulatory. It's almost like,
especially at the end.
Yeah, it's like, look who I've put on scrreen.
I've
put Native Americans as lead characters in this. It's kind of a little bit too proud of what it's doing.
And then there's this this outro scene which does what many films based on a real story, Hollywood films based on a real story do. The wrap up where you say this is when these people died, how long they served in prison. You sort of stop the narrative, and then he uses like a weird Barbarian sound studio like radio play Foley scene to announce what happened to everyone afterwards, like how long they were in jail.
Because this was a public interest story, so it caught the nation.
And then at the very end, when they get round to telling the story of what is the woman's name?
Anna.
No,
Anna?
the main woman played by Lily Gladstone. Burkhart.
Molly
Burkhart.
Molly
He
Burkhart.
finally describes what happened to Molly Burkhart, it cuts, like Scorsese comes on stage and announces it and reads out her obituary, and then says, there was no mention of the murders in the obituary, and then it's just like shut the fuck up, like just get, like, this isn't about, and I don't think he's like an arrogant person, but it just felt like, why do you need to tell us that you've done this great thing? Like, just like, you've just told us the story. Don't like, come on. Don't.
We know how you feel about it.
Don't.
Already,
yeah, it's just like waiting for a stand. He's waiting for a standing ovation, and it's just a bit sickly, really. So that like annoyed me a bit. But some very good storytelling along the way, especially.
I feel like it's kind of like a return for him. A kind of, there's a return to the Irishman was a real sloppy mess that was I think just designed to really just appeal to sort of like the sort of film bro Die Hard.
I mean, Scorsese fans love it.
Yeah, they absolutely love it, which is a real red.
Like,
and we're not really Scorsese fans.
It takes us back to the territory of maybe a film like The Departed. And I think it operates in a similar territory of Departed, with a kind of a naive character, a kind of Machiavellian boss guy.
Scorsese?
I guess like King of Comedy.
It's got to be King of Comedy, probably yeah.
Or
damn it, that was going to be mine.
It's probably objectively his best film, I think, because he inhabits like quite a ambiguous, morally
I do like
ambivalent
Raging Bull,
place.
actually.
Yeah,
Raging Bull's
good.
really good, actually.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver's pretty good, but it's not.
I think he had
not as good as
early career success, and then has gone into making. He wants to make the great American novel, but in film shape, basically. And I think a film like,
I think Scorsese, in his latter days, making these epics, which he's been churning out.
I do respect it. Like
he's
ambition.
sort of like David Lean or something. No, or do you know David?
There is a Leanic
I don't know,
qualities
or like,
to these films in a way, I think.
And I sort of hope that in the grand march of history, he'll be remembered more for his archival
archival efforts. He's like film archivist and also director.
Yeah, he also made
Scorsese.
films, is what people will say.
Do you know? So there's something about one thing I do feel strange about this film. I was watching it, and it felt like it had no real moral center, and it thought it had a moral center about us. But it felt like it was
quite moralistic, no?
It was, but it didn't feel like it really followed through on that. Like, it felt very kind of passive in a way it was trying not to be. I felt very unmoved by much of this film, and it was trying desperately hard to tug on my heartstrings and pull me in a particular way. But it was so inevitable, the actual kind of like the wrap up, It was inevitable that Molly wouldn't die at the behest of these drugs. You know, she'd have a kind of like third act saving arc, and
it's based on a real story, right? So, but then they would have picked it if it didn't have this.
Exactly. So we get a story where Molly, you know, there's a good doctor who arrives, and there's a good federal agent, you know, played by Meth Damon, but played by
Jesse Plemons.
Jesse Plemons.
Hilarious.
So Jesse Plemons turns up as this good, seemingly naive, but actually very very smart government investigator, and he's like the white knight that turns up at the end and makes it all right. So there's this big saving grace, and it really like gasses up.
People love him. He's like a hero, isn't he? Just like it's very well cast as the saving grace. He's like, because he's just got this.
He's so unoffensive.
He's got this kind of folk heroism.
So its neatness makes it ultimately uninteresting.
Yeah, watch it on your laptop with your normie partner.
Watch it on a plane.
Watch on a plane, actually. Very good plane film. Yeah.
You've got a 3.5 hour flight. If you're flying to maybe Bucharest or Istanbul or something, this is a perfect film.
Yeah, you're inspired after you watch.
Inspired after Do Not Expect Much at the End of the World.
Everyone's got
I don't think you can actually watch Killers of the Flower Moon in the time it takes to fly to Romania, because it is 3.5 hours. Or maybe Romania is 3.5 hours away.
Yeah, I think it's quite far
away. So you have to get it on as soon as like the no smoking sign
Once
goes.
wheels are up and you've got your bag of pretzels, then whack Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, I think it's for flying to America probably. Anyway, I think we conclude on the McQueen actually.
Yeah.
Because it's all three of us. And Europa we have to talk about, but I'm just going to do a quick review of quite an important film of the festival, May December by Todd Haynes.
Memory we also have.
And we have to we got
I'm going to step into the shadows for this.
But yes, we will talk about coming up Memory, a big disagreement between myself and George about the new Michel Franco. But May December is a kind of a melodrama. I suppose every Todd Haynes film is a melodrama in a way, starring Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman as one woman shadowing another for the purposes of portraying her in a film. The subject of the film is a woman who was put in jail for having a sexual relationship with a 13-year-old boy who 24 years later, she is now still married happily with children.
Spicy.
It's very spicy age gap. Another second age gap relationship for this festival.
Brea as well.
Brea had a May December vibe. Natalie Portman, who I don't want...
Third if you count memories in the second childhood of dementia.
True. So May December, it's kind of, like it returns to the sort of more transgressive thematic energy of... I suppose a lot of his films think about transgression, but Poison, for instance. But also, I mean, all of his films have a sort of Circean sense of transgression. Maybe not the Bob Dylan one, I didn't see that. But yes, it uses, like so many great American films at the moment, as I find myself frequently saying, it has this postmodern about filmmaking quality that I think kind of helps its case. Julianne Moore, I don't often, and on this podcast, we're not fond of esteeming actors above auteurs, but Julianne Moore is certainly someone who I'll be more likely to watch a film because of her presence in the starring role. She is absolutely electrifying, although she has a strange lisp that comes and goes in it. But anyway, this is a small
fifth
thing. Yeah. But yes, she plays like seemingly a deeply delusional person, although various facts around this somewhat possibly exploitative relationship, although the sense of exploitation has been removed now that the two people in the relationship are consenting adults. But there's this obvious uncomfortableness. One of the opening scenes, she receives a package of dog shit from a stranger in her letterbox, which Natalie Portman finds and gives to her, and not realizing what's in it. So there's a sense of menace. There's a sense of a kind of someone who's been scoured by the tablets. She's spent time in jail. She's on the sex offenders register.
There's a kind of cachet vibe to this.
Yeah.
There's a Hanekean postage.
But it's all on it's in Long Island, or no, maybe not. It's in Georgia, but it's like on the coast. So she's like, this coastal. It's quite nice coastal. She lives very near to all these members of her family, of her previous marriage, who are all kind of a bit like frustrated with her in different ways. So she lives a very odd existence, making cakes for people. It later transpires that these cakes she's basically been given something to do. People are ordering these there's a line where someone says, how many pineapple upside down cakes does one person need? Julianne Moore's character is this delusional housewife who's just kind of completing tasks for no reason, just to keep her out of trouble.
She's getting lost in work.
Exactly. The performance of her partner, who is this half Korean guy who was 13 when they met in a pet shop that she worked at, that they both worked at, is really interesting. His character starts off not really having much of an identity, and then we get to find a lot more about him. He collects bugs. There's this amazing ongoing.
That sounds like a very Haynes detail.
Yeah. There's the stuff. He's messaging a girl on the Facebook group for this particular kind of bug and butterfly that he's like this chrysalis.
Respect.
Yeah. So he has this strange limerence with someone he's never met.
There's got to be a reference to the woman in the dunes.
Could be.
Why dunes?
Iconic bug collecting guy.
Oh, true. Yeah. Could be.
One of the great entomologists.
I forgot about the entomology aspect of that film. But yes, so there's various very Haynesian details to this romance. It's produced by Netflix. It's actually, I think, probably the last outcome of Netflix's very uneven run of in-house produced works, which I guess began maybe with Cuarón's Roma, continued with Marriage Story, which I thought was very good.
Sort of hit its rocky crescendo with Blonde, right?
Exactly. And now May December, which it will be on Netflix at some point.
Maybe they'll get the box set treatment at some time. Interesting to consider this as a little.
Yeah, it's strange.
I
don't know why Netflix is stepping. Maybe they just lost loads of money when people.
They've stopped making money across the board. They're losing money
because obviously made loads of money in pandemic, and then But anyway, it's interesting that quite a commercially oriented film should be so good. It's like original IP. It's not fucking based on. It's not a film about a famous person. It's not based on a really famous book series or something. It might be based on a book.
Who wrote the script?
I think it's written by Todd Haynes. Yeah. Might just double check that. But it's really good. The final scene, which is like a scene from the film that they're making, didn't quite work for me. It sort of slightly missed its last final punch. But I was just so enraptured by the vast majority of it. It's got this kind of absurdity. There's lots of transgressive nonce jokes.
So actually, sorry, it was written by Sammy Birch, who is also known for writing The Hunger Games.
Wow.
They weren't bad films.
Really?
No,
okay.
They're fine.
Great performance from guy from Magnolia.
Tom Cruise.
It'll come to me.
The other guy.
Dead. Heroin overdose.
Oh, Heath Ledger.
No, he's not my guy.
Who's?
Synecdoche, New York.
Oh, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was having a senior moment. I was having a Seymour moment.
Seymour moment, yeah.
Having a memory moment.
He wants to see more.
There's a segue.
There's a segue. Okay.
He wants to see more butts.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and this is when you realise that I actually confected this entire thing to enable that segue.
Sure. It feels natural to shift into talking about the new Michel Franco film. Michel Franco.
So you thought, wait. So May December. Good. You think it was good?
It was, when I saw it, my favourite film of the festival.
Wow.
I'm not. Oh, actually, apart from the Radu Jude, but I had seen the Radu Jude in a different moment. But yes. May December, really good. Okay. It's not totally perfect, but it's a kind of I don't know. I didn't like. It's better than Carol, definitely, which was also good. I mean, he's just a good filmmaker, he's not lost his bite. He's not become apologetic. He's got this real way of. I mean, maybe it wasn't. Yeah, I guess totally written by him, but it's got the Haynes stamp. And melodramas are still. I mean, the music is very heavy and almost too much sometimes. But it's like. The music is like a combination of the Halloween theme tune and the Succession theme tune. It has this real belligerent banging. Like when
is it Clint Mansell or something? I can look it up.
Fact check
but anyway, it's May December. It will be out in cinemas and on your Netflix screen very soon, I think. But definitely worth checking out. Good fun and genuinely quite moving at times as well.
Okay.
And
Natalie Portman is so back.
And Natalie Portman, yes, Natalie Portman is. One note on Natalie Portman. I think she's had work done. She looks like
you heard it here first. Folks.
She looks like young but in a different way than when she looked young, which is a kind of, and her face doesn't quite move as much as it did in Black Swan, more than Botox. I don't know. I don't want to throw her out. I might be completely wrong.
Allegations.
True.
But
Let's see.
I thought you were looking up who the composer was.
Yeah, we got sidelined with commenting on women's bodies.
Never that on Return to Form.
Yeah, there could be a little bit of Botox.
But she looks different from that as well.
Oh, really? More inflated.
More just still. I don't know. Anyway, I digress massively. I think it's an amazing performance from her. But what's so beautiful, the beautiful detail is that she plays a famous actress who is well known and well recognized by people in the community she's visiting for this shadowing work. And she's recognized from a famous TV show that she was in called Nora's Ark. Which I just thought was a beautifully written detail. But yes, her character, she gets completely sort of lost in the source. It's a nice, it's kind of an actor's film. I think it's like a film about the process that actors go through when they try to be someone else, and when being someone who really existed and trying to kind of like understand them, but also get she's constantly invited to by the friends and family of the main character to tell the real story, i.e. be nice to her, present a kind of faithful recognition of her. So yeah, Portman on great form, Julianne Moore on absolutely stunning form, which
sounds a bit like adaptation then.
Yeah, somewhat, although it's not as meta. It doesn't have that kind of like meta self-consciousness, which is a good thing, I think. But yeah.
That's just swimming around in my head, just this kind of doubling and sort of, shadowing thing about adaptation.
True. It's nice to know that melodrama is a viable form still.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
I mean, one of our favourite filmmakers ever, David Lynch, is like the master of the melodrama in a lot of ways. It's
of the melodrama vernacular,
Yeah.
So as previously threatened and advertised, we are now going to talk about Michel Franco's Memory. Can we get a little recap on Michel Franco's career? Was After Lucia his first film or one of his first films?
No, it wasn't. There was this film Daniel and Anna before the one.
After Lucia was his second
So
film,
I think we all agree that the best film by Michel Franco that we've seen is After Lucia, which was shot on a DSLR in 2012, and it's about a sort of very insidiously escalating case of bullying of a young girl who's sort of, it's a sort of scarlet letter situation. She's sort of caught via video, shared around her.
So you've been publicly shamed.
Yeah, of her snogging and fucking a guy in her year, and then this makes her life becomes hell.
And then the sort of enormous kind of inevitable violence not inevitable violence of the father.
Yes, well, let's not spoil it. But yeah, After Lucia has
superbly controlled and paranoid and unflinching from the kind of viciousness of it.
Beautifully composed. Yeah. If you take nothing else away from this this review of Memory, it should be watch After Lucia.
Well, I did not see Memory, so
which we all agree is better.
But I know you two are going to come to loggerheads about this.
Actually, my ferocity towards it has dimmed a bit, and now it's kind of evened out into that shrug emoji.
Well, I'm sure. No doubt, I will be able to reinvigorate you with my
any hint of enthusiasm will probably be enough to bring it back.
So, the premise of Memory is
forgetting.
Begins with a rather mysterious scene. It opens with a woman in an AA celebrating her 13th year sober in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and
it's profoundly ugly from the get-go, right?
No, I think these opening shots are nice. I like it. It's good.
I hate the shallow depth of field already.
No, it's good. Anyway, otherwise, I think the cinematography is very pedestrian, but we'll get to that. This woman played by Jessica Chastain, who I was thinking actually would play Julianne Moore's daughter really well.
Yeah,
the same kind of energy.
True. High cheekbones.
But yes, she is followed after reluctantly attending a high school reunion. She's followed home by a guy at the reunion. A mysterious bearded guy played by Peter Sarsgaard. This guy then just like stays outside her flat for the whole night, and it then emerges after she kind of helps him get home that he has extremely early onset dementia and doesn't really know a lot of the time what he's doing. She then accuses him of having raped and helped someone else rape her repeatedly when they were both at school. But then this story itself seems to then have been possibly misremembered because they didn't attend the school at the same time, according to official records. and then they have this kind of friendship and then kind of romance, which is undergirded by this constant challenging of memory and stories. She is overcome by this trauma at some point in her childhood. She was abused. It then emerges it may have been her father. He is a kind of constant blank slate. He keeps forgetting things that happened, but he has this kind of affable friendliness that greases the wheels of their relationship. She works in an adult daycare center, and then the family of this man take a shine to her and hire her as his full-time carer. I thought, and I will throw to you to challenge this assertion, but I thought it was a conceptually coherent, quite poorly shot, and sometimes overly repetitive, but well characterized and well performed story that mulled over, made some interesting juxtapositions of themes and mulled over some issues that, some ideas, some dynamics that felt reasonably engaging and so, at times moving.
Okay. Well, I'm happy. I thought it was...
That is the essence of criticism, isn't it?
I thought it was maladroit, sophomoric. It was aiming for a solemnity that was incapable to achieve. It was like it mishandled all of its moments of true dramatic potential attention. And it fluffed the bag on most of them. Even this pursuit scene that you described from the...
right from the off, this scene you didn't like?
From the get-go. I thought the way it was shot, I mean, all of it, in fact. And what the entire film presented was just like such a wild bled dry of like all sensuousness, or even as it was trying to actually transmit this quite heartwarming tale of kind of forbidden love. It was executed with such charmlessness, such sheer ugliness, that I couldn't look past this. I mean, like, the story was not sufficiently enticing for me to be able to like disengage from how horrendous all of the shots looked for its entire duration. And like, I know you're going to say, look, it's innocuous, everything looks as bad, but I do think if you've seen something from that's fine if you're seeing something from somebody all of whom's films look dreadful. But
it's not an intentional.
But I don't know if this is so different.
He's capable of moments of real lucidity and beauty. So with Arthur Lucia, even for its starkness, is a very beautiful film. Sundown has its moments, but Sundown is kind of relatively.
No, but Sundown was executed competently, and here, for instance,
Sundown looks much better.
Right, and there was just a real. What really jarred with me here was the sloppiness. It seemed that in critical moments throughout the script, the first idea that would appear to you, like everything was first draft to me. So, for instance, the song that in his kind of sundowning, I've just realized actually that both films are about depletion and deterioration of one's mind, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's his new theme.
Everyone's new theme at the moment, it seems.
Yeah, senescence in general, aging society.
So
he's worried.
He's looking early.
Yeah.
So he's continually listening on a loop to Whiter Shade of Pale. You know, it's like, which I found like
I didn't actually recognize this song.
The corniest, most obvious choice. And then there's another scene when he sat there with his carer / lover's daughter playing Guess Who. And they just
not in a profound moment.
But they thought it was profound, and I really think so. I think this film was very smugly convinced of its own heartwarming potential, and I was resolutely unmoved for the entirety. And it's a shame because I do think both of them are trying their best, and they're pretty good performances.
And I think the mother actor was quite good as well. I liked her.
Also, it was signaling like every the revelation of the severity of the abuse to which she's been subjected when she was a kid is again a scene that is just like so consummately mishandled that you wonder like I wondered like why is he making films. Like if he really just doesn't have the instincts in how to execute this with any measure of like sensitivity or truth.
The family scene. Yeah, I thought this was really well blocked. I thought this had the great dynamic.
Not at all. The guy just lingering on the frame of the shot and then meaninglessly kind of intruding at certain points, and the brother.
Oh, this was
and
great.
Also,
the discomfort of this was amazing and very similar to the best moments of After
There was no
Lucia.
truth to it. It felt to me like sophomoric in the genuine sense of like an adolescent. When they write often like their juvenilia first story, they feel they have to go for big themes. They have to go for
sometimes big themes come off.
Right.
But arguably, he's always pursued
but
big
this did
themes.
not feel like
child abuse, rape, sort of mental decline.
But once he was able to step up to the plate. But here I just had the feeling that this was...
I think the difference is, like, by the sounds of it, I've not seen this, I'll have to be the tiebreaker when I see it, is that in earlier films, maybe he's operated in a space where he's not disclosed. There's been... a lot has been held back. So,
somewhat the case with this,
Sundown holds back its big reveal until the end, and also
it was suspense.
Which was always the mistake of Sundown was revealing it.
After Lucia leaves a lot of its, sort of it's very much just the bone. The fat is stripped away. The death of the mother, the kind of all the context around. We're given very little to go on.
Right.
So we don't see crucial scenes like her rape. We don't witness. We're not in the room when that happens. It's implied. So he's quite good at kind of holding back, I suppose.
Yeah, off-screen space here was not really,
fair enough.
Not really utilized.
I just feel like with Michel Franco, again, I'll need to see this, but it's funny. I don't feel like do you feel like there's like an established Michel Franco style? If you were showing these,
after this, I don't think he's an auteur.
I mean, he is technically in it. I mean, he directs films, and he's
no Radu Jude. Saying.
No, but when you say auteur, do you mean like
it's because I saw it on the same day as the Jude. I think there's also cast a negative pale over it, but
it should hold high standards for everything.
Yeah, and
check on the Battered.
Generally, I think I was also smarting from like how rapturous a reception I'd heard that this had received at Venice. A 7-minute ovation.
But what is really? Why is anyone giving anything a 7-minute ovation?
This is about Dementia. Everyone's making Dementia.
Are they worried they're going to be shot if when
a tawdry 7-minute?
Maybe everyone in the audience had dementia drama. And they forgot they'd been clapping for 7 minutes.
True. What did I just watch again? I mean, you do get this feeling when you read a Bradshaw review, to be honest. By paragraph 3,
what's he really
you're making this narcolepsy allegation of Peter Bradshaw. Every time you read it,
I will defend it.
Okay, so so we've not really reached the point of catharsis on that. We're not sufficiently dialectical.
I just can't wait to forget it. I think I will have forgotten it sufficiently by next week, and then I can.
There was
fitting.
There was an interesting thing that Peter Sarsgaard said in an interview on the red carpet, that he was very. And this is a bit of a banal observation, but all the scenes are filmed in one take. Like After Lucia, lots of the dialogue scenes are not shot reverse shot; they're just like master shots, like this podcast at the moment. And that this allows for you to sort of develop a performance, which I think is a very admirable technique.
Yeah, you're not chopping up the.
It does make for like nice moments.
He shoots in sequence as well.
Does he?
Franco,
okay.
Yeah. So there is.
I mean, you don't have to do that, but
no, you don't.
It does sometimes help. There's just a lot of people going in and out of rooms, and a lot of like repetition that just doesn't really.
And a lot of visual redundancy. I mean, like
of course. I mean, that's I wouldn't defend it against those allegations. But there we are. Memory.
Not beating the redundancy allegations.
Yeah. You will have to. I think. I would say to people, like, worth a watch if it's on Mubi and you don't. But anyway, it's if you haven't seen After Lucia, you should watch that instead. Weirdly hard to get a hold of. Well, actually, I think you can stream After Lucia, but yeah. Anyway, I am now going to have to talk about a film that neither of my companions saw. Which one do you want me to talk about? Sweet East or Hoard first?
I want to hear about Sweet East because I was on the cusp of seeing this and didn't quite manage to get to it.
So,
and then I want you to Knives Out for Hoard.
We don't know if that's what I'm going to say.
Can we reset for a second?
Yeah,
because I need to piss.
The Sweet East is the debut feature by Sean Price Williams, who is a DOP typically, a very experienced DOP who's been working in the American indie scene for since the mid-aughts, basically. He DOP'd on Frownland by Ronald Bronstein, which is quite a cult classic of the sort of Mumblecore adjacent world. He worked with Alex Ross Perry on all of your favourite Alex Ross Perry films. Listen Up, Philip, Queen on Earth. Anyway, the ones with Elizabeth Moss. More recently, he DOP'd Good Time by the Safdie brothers, and also a couple of films by Eugene Kotlarenko, friend of the show.
Yeah, Zeros and Ones, famously.
Did he DOP Zeros and Ones? He did War Palace for sure, yeah. So a very experienced and very exciting cinematographer. In many ways, thinking about the breadth of those films and the people he's worked with, definitely one of the DOPs you would be more keen to see a feature from. Add to that it's written by Nick Pinkerton, a sort of sight and sound critic, just freelance film critic, film writer, switch your mic on. And writer recently of this quite lovely small purple book about Simon Yang's Goodbye Dragon Inn. Anyway, that is the personnel. It stars Talia Ryder, who's quite a new actor. She's quite young, she's 21, I think. And then a strange range of difficult and odd men. The premise, basically, is a woman adrift. We don't really know much about where she's coming from. She tells lots of people different stories about where she's come from. She drifts through various different scenes that have various different political perspectives. She hangs out with some punks led by this crazy, heavily pierced, especially on his penis, sort of skater punk guy played by Earl Cave, who lives in a squat and does anti-fascist actions. While she's on this anti-fascist action, she sort of gets a bit lost and ends up at the fascist action that is being targeted by the anti-fascists who never actually find the anti-fascists. There she meets a very dashing Simon Rex, the famous porn star who's recently taken quite a brilliant, I think, turn into acting in things that aren't porn. He plays a kind of hyper sincere, but also quite affectionate, far right whack job, who he takes her under her wing. Obviously, her general youth and attractiveness is sort of a factor here, but he doesn't exploit it. She sort of does exploit it at various points, and this takes her across to the next stage of her life, which is in New York. She runs off with some money, and she meets these young black filmmakers who are making a kind of film about the birth of America, reframing it from a sort of non-white perspective. Alongside this, she's playing alongside a famous English actor who's actually played by Jacob Elordi. And then there's this kind of crescendo, this like schlocky massacre that happens on the set. No one really believes that it's happening because the film is full of all these strange, the film within a film. Again, another American film. I'll maybe talk about this in a moment, actually, this because it fits very well into this tendency, but another American film about filmmaking.
Sounds very like Andrea Arnold coded.
I haven't seen American Honey. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm thinking about this kind of road trippy, kind of American, slightly hypnagogic kind of journey through the American soul, in a sense.
Yeah, it's very much. I mean, I don't know that much about. I haven't been to America very much, but there's one thing people always say about America. It's that whoever you meet in America, they always tell you this isn't the real America. You know, and the sheer vastness of America, the fact that you can really go on the run and like not be found.
Well, it's that kind of the tendency you see in modern filmmakers as well, like Sean Baker as well.
Yeah.
You've got these
it's Mikey from Red Rocket.
Nice.
So there's a continuity. There's a kind of idea of these edges and fringes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very energetic film right from the start. The opening scene is her in bed with this guy who's like playing a funny trick with a sort of condom full of cum with her, like sort of taunting her a bit with it. It has like
classic joke,
and then she like says retarded in the first way. It just immediately announces itself as like a film, like don't, like if you're a pussy, like get out. Like it has this kind of prickly edge, but not in a overly performative like.
But it's not actors.
No, it's not. I think Peter Vack and Betsy Brown have like a really small cameo in it really early on.
Okay.
But I might be wrong about that.
It's the Times Square extended universe.
It is part of that universe, I guess. But as people from that universe often say, like this isn't actually a scene. It's just like a few people mates, who know each other, and that's the case wherever you go. If in a city. But yes, it is it's a tremendous feat. But I think it does lose its way. There are sort of baggy bits because it's episodic and picaresque. There are bits where you just sort of get stuck in one place, and it's a gift and a curse, the fact that this protagonist is constantly borrows her personality from whoever she last hung out with. It makes for great moments of humor, and it allows everyone you meet to project themselves beautifully onto this character. I think that broadly works, but it is a little frustrating to sort of just basically be looking at a pretty face who can't quite manifest as anything else. But nevertheless, the performance from Talia Ryder is really compelling. It's a film that I think I don't really have a huge amount more to say about it, weirdly, even though it's quite rich and bold, and I think it's a very promising debut. It made me return to some of the films that he had DOP'd, particularly Frownland by Ronald Bronstein, which is a really interesting effort. Like a bit like Yeast by Mary Bronstein, actually. But sort of more masculine, sort of kind of misanthropic version. But yeah, it's I do think something's happening with, and maybe it is a scene, right? You have like the rehearsal by Nathan Fielder. You have John How to with John Wilson. You have the Adam Friedland show. You have I extended this to Succession. I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but like Succession is also about media. This film Rotting in the Sun recently, which I did really like. Lots of really, I'm sure there are other examples that I'm forgetting right now, but lots of really good contemporary culture coming from America is about
Louis, also.
Who?
Yeah, Louis C.K. His like
back in the day.
Yeah. Which actually,
there have been like shows about. I mean, Seinfeld. There have been like shows about comedians, but there's this particular moment right now where there's like a meta-ness that's being lent on for the kind of dramatic edge.
Well, I think it reflects like maybe a cultural industry in decline or in chaos in some senses. It's definitely beginning to refract itself through itself. It's kind of going back into the archives and going, well, what is this? What are we doing? It hasn't got the confidence of like the golden age of Hollywood. Where
you can't just tell stories.
You can't just tell stories because the stories aren't presenting themselves anymore. What constitutes a story is different, kind of in its makeup and in its kind of ingredients. So maybe it's maybe it reflects a certain high degree of media literacy amongst the we've never been more literate and in theory more canny as spectators. At the same time, we are sort of buffeted and
but it's funny that it is funny that it's happening now because like
there was the Malkovich Spike Jonze wave.
Right. There's a kind of there's a 90s Gen X wave,
but it's coming back now. Why?
But that was more like the kind of I guess like the Infinite Jest. It was this kind of deep. It was this kind of carefully postmodern approach, and this isn't postmodernism. This is something else, I think.
Yeah, perhaps.
It seems to be the thing that's giving things at the moment there. I don't know.
It's certainly the most interesting American, visual.
Is it safe?
Visual
is
media
it safer to
right
go? I don't know what the story is. There aren't stories out there.
It's definitely.
Look inwards.
Yeah, it's definitely like if you don't have the money to do the Scorsese thing of like a kind of pristine recreation of something, then it's a very interesting strategy to like break it all down and break the fourth wall.
I wonder whether it's also of a piece with a kind of auto-fictional turn, right? Like it's a kind of you know what I mean? It's the dramatization of the dramatization of this kind of recursive.
I think social media is like also a factor, like the looking like at watching oneself being watched, and some variation on the Bird.
I just realised we're actually in a recursive corridor here with the kind of projector and
true.
But
this is there is. Rotting in the Sun is sort of about a social media personality as well. So there are these. That's probably also in the water. Although social media has been around now for a very long time, so it is.
Well, perhaps it's because it is so markedly tearing apart American society.
True. And I suppose the Sweet East does reflect on this. You have lots of people from different wings of, and what's quite, it shouldn't be that impressive, but it is good that this film isn't like a liberal film that kind of
dipped its toe into the idea of spectatorship, because ultimately at this coda we talked about, we're given the story, we're not just given the epic, we're given the epic as it was received by the wider American public.
That sounds so annoying. But it sounds like the end of Black Klansman, if you remember.
I didn't see it, but this is a very
fucking hell.
This meta-ness undermines the project, whereas I think when these kind of indie projects we're talking about, it's kind of
integral.
It's a central tenet of the way the thing works. Radu Jude also to an extent self-reflexive, but
from a different tradition.
But exactly,
a more literary kind of Euro tradition, I think. But what was that?
Is someone killing a cow?
I think cats are trying to fuck or kill each other.
Fucking cats.
Amazing.
I might have to go out with some water and dampen the
flames.
I did happen at 4 a.m. once. I was asleep and like I had to just like throw some water on a cat to stop them because it was so loud.
It's a classic medieval trope. That's very Rabelaisian, throwing water on some fucking cats.
Shut up!
Shut up!
Just throw your slops out on them.
So yes, the Sweetest. Definitely go see it. Definitely an exciting film. Not perfect, but it did have this amazing Cassavetsian like punch to it that just made me feel
faces,
like I felt after seeing it, I was like, fuck yeah, we can all just like we can go out there and we can see the world in our own way, and we can depict it. Like everything is there. Like the material is all around you. It's a film that very much imbibes that. And
Faces, my favorite American film.
Is it? Interesting.
Yeah,
it does have a bit of a Faces energy. It's like Faces mixed with maybe Greg Araki, I guess, like Doom Generation Greg Araki. It has this. Yeah, it has this like punky, like adventure quality.
Well, yeah, because this is drawing out of this is sipping from the Kool-Aid of Harmony Korine as well. You know, these quite like it's not an underground, but there's a sense of formal experimentation, weirdness, underbellyness of American culture, which I think these films are quite good. And Sean Baker in a different way, even though he's the wholesome end of the wedge. Julian Donkey Boy is at the bitter end. It's the bitter pill.
Also,
there's a wholesomeness to Harmony.
That's true.
The opening sequence of this film, the main character sings a song, and you never hear the song again. You never hear her sing again, but it's just quite a nice. Like she's just in a bathroom. It starts with this kind of like Pizzagate style raid. She's in the bar, and then like this woman comes in with a massive like shotgun and says to the guy at the bar, like, I know you're raping children in the basement. I know it. Don't deny it. And then like
this happened though, didn't it? Somebody did actually go.
She starts shooting around, and then like the main character like runs out with the Earl Cave guy. I mean, the more I talk about it, the more I'm like,
you sound really gassed up about it
again. Yeah, it just isn't like. It's sort of. It's a very ambitious and worthy,
great
attempt. I'm now going to just quickly run through Hoard by Luna Carmoon, which is one of the most popular films at the festival in terms of like, it's a debut, and there was a massive queue to go and see it, even amongst the press. It's funded by the BBC Films and by the BFI. This director has made a series of shorts, including Shag Bands, most recently, which came out in 2020. It is a film that starts with the childhood of its protagonist living with her mother, a single mother who's a compulsive hoarder in a very, very, in a kind of cheerful but completely decaying and dilapidated domestic environment. She then ends up in foster care. We jump ahead to the present day where she has a kind of After Sun style. No, that's I say After Sun style romance. After Sun is about a father and daughter. Yeah. But there's this kind of Paul Mescal style guy who she has this kind of. He's got a girlfriend, but they have this like dirty, mucky, play fighting romance. That is implied. It's implied that he's kind of basically not happy with his girlfriend, and he really wants to be like she taps into a side of him that excites her more. It's drab, it's manipulative, it's heavy-handed. What do you expect? It's a British film funded by the BFI. It uses music in a kind of like a very like annoying way that it ends on what's it called? Everything But the Girl. A step out the play. Anyway, yes, I think someone on Twitter who we were having a chat with on the Return to Form Twitter account made a good point about this, that it one doesn't want to be too mean because basically this seems like a very personal work for everyone involved, but like it gets completely lost in translation. Unfortunately, so much of British film is basically people having a profound experience in their life, trying to communicate this experience
and failing
in a way that feels authentic to them, but actually doesn't work as a film because they haven't themselves mastered the tools of film in a way whereby they can make deliberate decisions.
It's
I think
this sort of Shane Meadows thing with Dead Man's Shoes.
I think also true of After Sun, although I think After Sun is a better film than this. This film relies really heavily on extremely manipulative moments of signaling, a little bit like the Mother of Mine short that we talked about, where various objects were identified and as being like ciphers for grief.
Hairbrush.
There's a moment where in the childhood sequence, the mother daubs her daughter with chalk as a way of showing how she loves her, and then we later see a man she's interested in dusting a pool cue at a pub when she's in her sort of teenage years.
It's hardly Proust, is it?
No, exactly.
Snooker cue.
Yeah, and what happens that's so disgusting about like what's so irritating is that then all this ambient sound goes down and you get this
not this Foley
thing,
fucking
and then the Foley
again.
gets really loud and everything's slow motion and you're being told extremely heavy-handed, this is reminding of her something, this is important. It doesn't have the confidence in the audience to just like see stuff that's in the mise en scène and like respond to it.
But
in
I mean,
their
it
own
sounds
time
like across the board this is what we're identifying in the this like absence of confidence in the intelligence of your audience. I mean, there is a moment in the Jude film, for instance, when defending her kind of Bobita character, Angela is like, look, I just, I trust that people are intelligent enough to understand what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it is a film which throughout sustains itself, and nobody left, and I was seeing it in NFT1 packed out, and it's just this condescension, and especially these Foley maneuvers every time are just straightforwardly.
But we've had this since like the 90s. I mean, this technique. I guess like.
But it's becoming ever more. It
used to be the preserve of genre cinema. It used to be like Sexy Beast or like almost
or the Bourne films
Guy Ritchie or something. You hyper-intensified,
overproduced in that sense.
But the fact that they're being deployed in these films that are supposed to be quite humane, like intimate genre.
Remember
Lucas Dont did it.
Remember like Emily Atef with these.
Emily Atef did it. Not so strongly in the Emily Atef.
No, but particularly with these sex scenes where you could really hear the zip being pulled down the dress. It was like this really, it was this really kind of, and I think there was a sense where the Foley has become so overdeveloped as a kind of
It's where
device.
Content becomes form because it's like it's so obsessed. It's like they think these filmmakers think that this is their like flourish, but really they're just like taking the script and like shoving it in your face in the most. And there are loads of bits of dialogue where people say these things like, I realize grief never stops. It actually just comes back in different forms. Or like a character will say to another character, why don't you love me enough? Why don't you love me like I love you? Like everything is like,
people don't really talk like that.
It's the BFI, like they lecture everyone about like show don't tell, but the people their flagship film is just full of these very, very clunky
signaling.
I
think it shows a lack of comfort and with the inherently filmy nature of film, with the tools of your disposal as a filmmaker, and it relies on, it almost assumes like film has to be a series of kind of emotional crescendos. There has to be these kind of key points. I mean, one of the tentpoles, it's all building towards a point, and then there's a kind of collapse, and then you build to another point again, and it's this kind of stochastic wave, and that's how British film or a lot of very manipulative art house film is done. Whereas one of the most interesting films we watched recently was probably The Mother and the Whore,
by Jean Eustache,
which
very good.
Never does that because it's like it's all peak. It's all kind of, and it's got
like Faces as well.
Faces. It's got a looseness about it. It's got a kind of tumbling. The film is falling down a flight of stairs.
Maybe what you want to visualize a kind of sine wave of the film. You want to see it like all peak, right? Like
all peak.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Do you mean in terms of quality or in terms of like energy? Because I think a good film doesn't always keep up the same energy.
You can build, but I think the British film.
I'm also fine with a film that doesn't build, that just stays.
Yeah, but like how are we deploying this metaphor?
I'm not sure.
All right. So what I'm thinking,
we don't know enough about sine waves, I think.
But when it comes to like these Foley techniques, they have a history and they have been deployed intelligently. Like come and see, for Klimov brings this into.
He uses deafness and the revocation of sounds.
There is being done to enhance the story of of like such kind of gut-wrenching severity, which is, and he's using every other cinematic tool at his disposal. It's not being used as a sort of cheat code to bypass intelligently doing everything else, which is what we are.
The other thing I must say about Hoard is, and I think this relates to my point about, I guess generally my point about identity politics filming. I mean, I don't think this was really an IDPOL film, but I mean, and it was quite interesting hearing Luna Carmoon at the red carpet saying that her main influences were like Deep End and a lot of these sort of 70s folk horror films, and for her these accusations of the film being histrionic and hysterical would probably be praised to her, because she likes the kind of Ennis Men style, like and sort of 70s nostalgia of like just heightening things because it's a heightened
in the interesting way of like a giallo or something, where you've got a kind of beauty through excess.
I think maybe the giallo register just doesn't work for British filmmakers. I think there's something weird with British people trying to do giallo style, like
because we have a history. We're repressed, whereas the Italians are inherently unrepressed.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if it was so easily explained by cultural.
It must be. I think it's absolutely a nativist reading of this.
But it does. Yeah,
if in doubt, reach for
it. It does fall flat. I think. But just to continue my thread here, the feeling that this was my story, and I've got to tell my story, which is all these shorts that we complained about in the previous report, funded by the BFI, follow this logic of like, hang out with these people like this. Their people, their story is valid to them, and that therefore it will be valid to you. And it misses the kind of like the great leap that like James Baldwin always understood, which is that like we do have a shared humanity, and therefore no matter how horribly divided we are by politics, there is some way in which an intimate like experience can be communicated to everyone somehow, and that is radical. The like art in itself actually has this radical potential to be like objectively good, even though we will constantly disagree.
British film tends to operate in the register of that meme, which is damn bitch, you really live like this.
Yeah. Like the BFI logic is like this is my story, and if you don't like you have to like it because it's my story, because it's my trauma, and I'm going to and that's why they end up spelling things out, and that's why also they spent hours and hours in these Hoard has loads of sequences that are presumably improvised scenes of schoolgirls kind of gossiping and joking with each other, and I'm rather concerned about the upcoming screening of How to Have Sex, which seems to be even more, I assume just by the title and the subject matter, that it will be more scenes, improvised scenes of teenage girls laughing and frolicking and bantering and talking about boys. And yeah,
Bechdel test failed.
Yeah, true. And it does.
That could be interesting.
It raises a laugh from the audience. After initially, and it rely. And I don't think foreign filmmakers, foreign audiences will find it particularly interesting, because usually the kind of register is like very British. I think
comedy. Where that doesn't work is if the rest of the film is in this very mannerist, exaggerated sort of
which it is,
register. Then these scenes of ordinary life, these snippets, these ethnographic snippets, don't work so well.
Yeah.
A film. We'll talk about Europa in a minute. Maybe it's a good segue, which kind of combines the ethnographic and the dramatic in a really interesting way, in a very sort of interwoven way. Whereas these things, that's not going to hit for me.
No, I think Hoard is a bit. I didn't see Scrapper, but the press around Scrapper was, which was another British film recently. Charlotte Reagan, I believe, was director, and she was saying that British films are too drab and social realist. In my film, I paint the council estate rainbow colours, in order to counteract this tendency, which was extremely
just don't shoot in a council estate.
Extremely tedious.
You can leave.
You need to get out of the hood.
Other locations do exist.
It was a sort of extremely facile antidote to Loachism. This felt a bit similar in that it was about a working class family, but it was an attempt to show like working class life as having this kind of like joie de vivre and charm and color, but it still relied like fundamentally the master's tools. It was still like the tool, the way it was basically like, this is my experience, and I'm not going to attempt to make it like I'm not going to attempt to tell this story any better than I need to, because this was my experience.
And desperate to humanize
exactly
these films. Yeah, I think that's the thing that's with the short films we saw as well. There was always a kind of humanizing. I'm
not against humanizing.
When it's done works, purely it's a fear of ambiguity and ambivalence.
True, and everyone who's a goodie needs to be sympathetic, and everyone who's a baddie, or even the kind of the complexity that's built around characters, like the mother seem, the sort of chaotic mother, it is built around like an assumption of your sympathy because of her position in society. It was nothing really worked in this film, but it was quite well cast. The vernacular cinematically was this kind of like slightly moving about, kind of over the shoulder vibe.
Roving
I think
out,
it was shot on film. The color was quite deep and interesting. Production design was pretty good. It spent a lot of time in rooms. I guess this is because the BFI don't really have much money, but it was like annoyingly a period piece about the late 90s, early noughts, a bit like After Sun. So again, you have millennial filmmakers who are now just making films about their child, and they can't even be bothered to set them in a time. So everything has to be like Blair.
The production managers on eBay going, I need to find 10
Woolworths bag.
Blackberries. Yeah,
exactly. Blackberries and Woolworths bags and everything. Yeah. It was really super annoying in that respect. It didn't dare to be contemporary. It didn't dare to step outside of the absolute specificity of the story it was trying to tell. And the story it was trying to tell was told in a far too overly direct way, and that made it kind of an alienating experience. And
don't be obvious.
Yeah,
or be obvious. So like Radu Jude is someone who's obvious in a way because she's presenting what the world to us as it is, but in the process fractures and fragments it, makes it very defamiliarizes it. Whereas this is, I don't like having my hand held for a film.
Yes, Hoard is like that, and it's basically
this.
It's a sentimental film that kind of that is aimed at like this very narrow group of programmers and critics, to whom this particular 70s nostalgist, 90s nostalgia...
When will it end?
It's
the long 1970s.
It's rooted in an idea of the working class, the noble working class of the Thatcher, the post that the sort of this era. I think the childhood bit is set during Thatcher, using this kind of 70s folk horror aesthetic.
Can I read something to you that I came across in the
Is this Hoard related?
Yes. So this is a snipping from the Guardian this weekend.
Oh, I know what you're about to read. Yeah.
Yes, when it comes to the way we dress, we're often cliches. We wear turned-up denim, Fred Perry, Universal Works, Converse, and Carhartt. Our clothes say unobtrusive and timeless. We fear new trends in case they make us look foolish. We worship the comedian Stuart Lee. We loathe Jacob Rees-Mogg. We're leftish centrists. We want no trouble.
He has a favourite Mahler symphony. He sometimes goes to Cafe Oto.
We're scrupulously careful around the work of women and musicians and actors. You can laugh at us, but as middle-aged men go, we're okay.
This is what
Music Dad.
The BFI is the BFI is Six Music Dad all over, and this is why bad films like Hoard keep getting commissioned. Yeah. It's a real shame. The old world
is dying, and the old world has just. I mean, Terence Davies
has just died.
Not even cold. So,
what's the meaning of that?
I think it's
the old world is dying.
Yeah.
Ken Loach is retired.
Ken Loach, thank God, has promised to make the Old Oak will be his last film. Terence Davies, whose films I never liked, has died. But obviously
relevant.
It's sad for his family. But
shout out to his family.
British film is it's grasping for some kind of some hope, like let's find a woman filmmaker who's like personal and radical, but it just falls so flat every time. I'm bored. I'm bored of.
Well, should we talk about films that are a bit more interesting?
Glad I didn't see them. All right.
Well, someone has to.
Should we talk about Europa?
Do the work,
and then talk about Steve McQueen, because we're fresh off the boat with Europa.
Let's leave England for Europa.
Okay, we're going to Mother Europe. We're now becoming Remainers, and we're going to the I guess the violences and the valences of the EU and the EU project and the European project, because we are going to Albania. But what we're doing with this film, so Europa is by Sudabeh Mortezai, sort of an Austrian-Iranian filmmaker. This is a film that explores in some of the ways that Radu Jude does, the kind of integration of Europe's fringes and undeveloped fringes with the kind of the Mittel Europe center of business, capital, finance, Germany. So we get basically our main character who's again a kind of Nina Hoss, Aldi Nina Hoss. Basically, she's like a young Nina Hoss, kind of ice queen corporate entity in a kind of Christian Petzold vein tradition of Nina Hoss playing characters in yellow who are, you know, business suited, sort of lanyard wearers.
Yeah.
And she's on mission in
the sort of friendly feminine face of Hard Capital.
Yeah, of Hard Capital, yeah, before the attack dogs get sent in. So she's in Albania on an unspecified kind of commercial enterprise, which is basically a development enterprise. Her job is to basically convince...
It's not quite clear what development...
It's sufficient. It's intentionally ambiguous and anodyne because these big corporate entities, you know, have really... Their project is capital. They don't have a specific thing. They're just they're mediators and financial
service provision.
Service provision. A company called Europa, which is also the name of the film.
I mean, the service could be advanced interrogation, or it can also be delivery of school meals. You know, it doesn't really...
Yeah. And in fact, you know, it begins with a great bit of whitewashing. She's there initially to present a scholarship program in Albanian University. So we think it's a kind of...
She gives a very girl boss speech all about like...
Completely empty and shallow.
Completely empty and shallow, yeah.
She is this kind of demonic, dead-eyed Hillary.
This is the most sort of satirical register the film reaches. Very early on, it sort of sets out its stall as a kind of parody of this woman. But then it enters...
It's a parody of...
Then it enters drama, yeah.
It enters drama, so a character... It's I've seen there's quite a lot of films like this and they're always quite good. You know, she's trying to convince smallholders in the Albanian countryside to sell up so they can build... X, some sort of project in the countryside, which is slowly revealed is not just any project. It's slightly militarized. You know, there's something. It's a security apparatus. This thing they're doing.
There's a real compulsion. What's beautiful, and like so many films that we talk about recently, there's a lot withheld, and you're kept wrapped by it, by knowing that there's something really important that needs to be done on this land, and you're only ever told what the current owners of this land,
like the smallholders in a way. You know, these Albanian farmers who practice a particular form of syncretic Islam. You are kept in the dark as well about the intentions. So it's not trying to be passive and hold you back. You obviously sympathise with these people, and you don't sympathise the more that you're exposed to this woman whose character's name I forget. This ice queen. You know, the more you're exposed to her, the more kind of the way that, and the film is quite on the nose about pointing out the ways in which she's shallow and these people live a very rich tradition. You know, we get a scene where they're slaughtering a goat, and we get this great bit of ethnographic film following the process of the slaughtering of a goat, and then we'll cut to her doing yoga in the garden of the house.
But also there's like a kind of dialectical like ambivalence to these dynamics, and there's one scene where she says to one of these families, like, you know, you're nowhere near a school, your daughter wants to be a doctor. Like why don't we're offering you the chance, you know, we'll pay you to move out of this place.
Yeah,
and this guy's like, my doctor will be whatever I want her to be. Right. Like, no, you know, so you're not like, these people aren't like completely...
Yeah, it's not a hagiography of like a simple
they're not like
life.
Noble
savages.
You know, exactly. They have their own, like, there's their power dynamics within power dynamics.
And I think it's quite acute in terms of observing how like particular discourses of women's liberation in particular can be actually used to inscribe countries into a sort of kind of neo-colonial setup.
Yeah, because that's what she's using.
For instance, the daughter becomes the cunning ploy to entice her father into this dubious contract, which will divest him of his ancestral home, and it will all get demolished, right? Because
and his business, like his means of living,
right? And so this scholarship program, which we see at the beginning, is actually the carrot used.
It's a piece of whitewashing, isn't it? But it's also an instrument. It's a surgical instrument.
So it's quite fun how it dramatizes. I think these CSR dynamics, the kind of human face of
CSR.
Corporate social responsibility. And we never, and in terms of withholding, we're never quite told the means by which she manages to convince him. To embark into this
it'll inevitably happen. She wears him down. Yeah, he's facing the inevitable. But
I think she works on the daughter, doesn't she?
Well, it's something to do with the beekeeping, because there's a point where the daughter points out that the thing that
the bees can be moved elsewhere.
Gives her father most satisfaction.
But there's a great scene where she admits this. You know, she stumps up, and we get a rare insight into how this character really thinks. And she says, you know, because she often talks in platitudes and reacts in these kind of platitudinous, you know, very artificial ways. And she says to the daughter, and the daughter's like, how will I convince my father? He's a very stubborn man. She says, well, you might have to manipulate him. She She's like, I don't want to manipulate him. She's like, well, all dialogue, all conversation is manipulation.
Yeah, but even then, I don't think we should even postulate here a kind of real character, because this character, it's all like for freedom's effect, it's all like total alienation. I mean, there is, and what I think the strength of this film is that it doesn't suggest that there is any that there's anything beneath this woman's
no, she's
outward veneer. Like
we get little scenes of her kind of zooming, like Zoom calling her family.
I don't think we needed it personally.
I was happy with those scenes, but they didn't actually add any important.
Because the high camp of her kind of evil corporate persona.
Yeah, I suppose
she's accompanied by a rather ineffective high camp senior man whose acting is like incongruously bad compared to everyone else.
It had the quality. He was this real automaton, this like business kind of American, big kind of broad American who was like kind of flirting with her in a kind of slightly patronizing way, and kind of his dialogue was very kind of corporate AI generator. It was like, we have to run this up the flag with legal, sort of all these like.
Which maybe it was sort of sending it up a bit, but in a kind of burn after reading Coen Brothers
because they meet in this really anodyne kind of anywhere bar with a neon sign.
It looked a lot like the Picture House.
The Picture House
we've been spending a lot of time doing this.
But I think there was something. So what the film does, I think. I was quite happy with how it was shot. It knew when to. I mean, there's a lot of visual humor in these kind of wide shots of landscapes because
also some gorgeous scenes just there for their own merit, like of the kids playing football and
there's some nice bits, but it's a great the visual that uses the landscape in those wide shots to satirize the corporate language, because she keeps telling these farmers. There's one scene where she's like, she's talking to a translator. Tell him, that they're living in an unsafe, uninhabitable environment, and then we're seeing these beautiful,
magnificent.
I also love the way that translation, like you really had to read the subs and listen, because there were these lovely little slips where the translation would be slightly different than what was said.
Because everything is being mediated through a translator.
Exactly. Who's our agent to get in here. So sometimes she would actually say something a bit softer and he would translate it in a slightly harsher way.
There's like a big, bulky, bald translator. He was a bit of a heavy, and he was like, a bit like later on there's a security guard who's of the same style, who like is saying in Albanian to this guy, he's saying like, don't make me beat you up. I'm going to have to beat you up if you keep doing this. Like there's this way in which the Albanians are talking to each other, and like the way they're carrying out these orders, and these different, like it's a really good film.
They've been
about
Uncle Tom'd in a way. Some of these kind of more elite ones who have got access to the English language and have got finance. They're actually in a position of power over these villages because they're not from there. Really, when the translator goes to the local church, the priest says to him, I never see you here. He's kind of calling him out for like, being separate from his bedrock in the community that sustained him. And he's kind of wielding his power now in his kind of fancy Carhartt gilet or whatever it is, he's kind of heavy handing the locals and the farmers, who obviously disdains a bit because he's like, this is a good deal. You're going to get money. And their stubbornness is completely understandable. They live in this pastoral idyll. Life is hard, but they live close to the land and have obviously a deep well of faith, which only makes her kind of lack of faith and her vape and her refusal to eat the local food. Completely vacuous. I know I'm vaping, but there's something about she refuses the cigarette, to have a cigarette with people, and she's no, I've got my own.
And they constantly invite her, like they have this hosting thing. At one point I wondered whether they were going to poison her because they keep offering her like raki and then all these meals.
But that's it. There is that, she's being extended such hospitality the entire, and she's this kind of like,
and she feels bad. It's not that she doesn't really have a moment of feeling guilt, but like part of her ambivalence to being fed all this food is like that she's vegan or whatever, but like part of it is that like she knows she's there to take from them, so like the idea that she's then like accepting gifts. I mean, even at the end, the people who sort of the B&B people who've hosted her in the village give her all these gifts, and
all this jam, and
it's just a total pain in the ass having to receive all this stuff that she's obviously going to throw in the bin or give to dogs, so it's
we see her feeding the meat dinner to dogs. The sheep's head that they've specially cooked is a sign of respect to her.
God, my mouth was watering at that moment.
I think I think this film managed to very successfully kind of sustain a particular like levity, but the comedy wasn't like, it wasn't anxious. It was and there was a real like kind of calm to it. Even the pacing, the rhythm of her just visiting one thing after the other. And we know there is going to be one great punctual moment of violence, but also it withheld the satisfaction somehow.
Well, it gave it to us at the beginning because the film opens. It's basically it's a Mobius strip. This film, isn't it? Yeah. So we start off this guy on the windshield of a car, banging through the glass, and they're trying to.
And it's filmed on the phone. I think it looks like it's a kind of the film. I don't want to give too much away, but basically there's a sort of there's a very arresting opening shot, which then like.
The film tells us how we got there.
Yeah, and then like we just go straight into.
And I really like that as a device.
It's clean.
I really like that as a device. I think it was really clever, and it just meant it opened with a real bravura. I was immediately, I was
the
like,
snapshot.
I think this is going to be good.
And this levity to me, like to telling the story of corporate malfeasance, instead of going kind of either zany mode with it, burn after reading style, or doing the severity of something like Ziva-Gintsev's Leviathan, which is also a story of a kind of a guy, or a kind of Aaron Brockovich contest. I mean, I like that film, but
it's good.
It didn't have any gags in it. Did it?
No, it's very
there are some very dry. I mean, we have to remember we're not Russian. Russians
does have a great gag in the court scene where the prosecutor is talking so fast. And
True.
There's a funny bit with a picture of Putin. I don't know. I think like Russia, like Zviagintsev films do have jokes.
The beats come in
like
different
when you're British, you don't always get them because they're so dark.
But this was quite universal in its humor because again, the kind of common language is English anyway. So there's a lot of like falling back into English language. And I think one of the great things as well is about this kind of corporate. This non-place corporate mannequin of this woman is incredible because there's a certain kind of sugary insincerity to her reactions. You know, when the girl buys her a coffee and she has like soy milk, and she's like, "That's so pleasant that you have remembered that I drink soy milk."
Amazing contradictions,
and it's completely empty.
I've met so many people like her. She really the performance is so good, and it really nails.
She's international school.
It really nails this like citizen of nowhere almost.
Totally.
Like this really alienated.
She's kind of McKinsey.
Yeah, this alienated like
drone, isn't she?
Global functionary.
Yeah, like friendly functionary whose sole purpose is to like get certain things from certain people, and she moves through the world with this totally like normal friendliness and the film gives you this beautiful intimacy of seeing her in lots of different contexts, and that's why I think actually it's quite important seeing her in this Zoom call with her family, even though those bits are quite underpowered. The fact of their underpoweredness, I think, does bolster like some of the other moments there.
Well,
like,
it gets us
to
see...
she's a normal, ordinary person. It's the banality of evil. She's a normal,
you
ordinary
can
person.
imagine a well-thumbed copy of the 48 Rules of Power, like on somewhere on her bookshelf, at home.
Yeah, we've got this kind of it's this kind of banality. We see her able to, and it's maybe something that will get picked up by Glazer as well when we watch Zone of Interest. But the kind of ordinary family life that persists at the core of this person's life, whereas the edges where they do real damaging dark work and they don't let it affect them. They're able to cut themselves off emotionally. The
damaging dark work, we like the really dark thing. We only see a short one scene.
And even then, it's played for laughs in a quite interesting manner.
Are we talking about the young kind of urban explorers?
Yeah. So we won't say. I don't really want to give away too much because this review is really an endorsement, really like a gesture to say you probably weren't thinking of seeing this film, and you should.
You really should, yeah.
And there is, if you have seen it, there's just this amazing. Almost reminded me of Reality. The Reality when a biopic Tina Satter that we reviewed in Berlin. Like it has this real clinical carrying out orders sort of like, and it's a huge reveal. It really like snaps you in. I mean, it's a very gripping film throughout, but it really like you have these sort of slowly scenes of like her negotiating and trying to be friendly and
gentle
these kind of awkward things. Yeah, and then you're suddenly like. The
gloves are off.
The gloves are off, and you're in, and it's completely different characters you're dealing with.
And it's shot differently as well. It's shot in this kind of 0 Doc 30 Catherine Bigelow style. It suddenly flips.
But you suddenly learn a lot more than you did know you knew before, but not the full. You don't learn everything about what it is she's doing.
It's kind of weird. So when we were talking about like early Christian Petzold as well, and I think I was talking about this kind of Maastricht minimalism of it, and something that the kind of Christian Petzold is doing. He's actually looking at the kind of
Maastricht as in the Maastricht Treaty.
Brussels, Breton.
Yeah, exactly. So he's. True. And then, but he's looking at the kind of interior, the damage that is done in the heartland of Middle Europe itself, right? But here we're looking at the edges, and there's a lot of dialogue about, the fringes of, empire where the real bloody work is done, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that we see it in this kind of European context. It's about story of integration, but it's like the other side of the coin of a Christian Petzold film. I think it would make a great double bill.
It is like Sudabeh, who explores this in her film Western, which is about sort of a kind of neo-colonial encampment of Germans in Bulgaria, which is actually based on.
And I think this kind of filmmaking is interesting because it's like particularly at the time when I'm bored to tears with Ramonas, who are so indifferently kind of Europhilic and seal clapping about the European project as the idea of the European project, but the reality of it is quite blood and guts and bicycles.
That's in a way why it's a good gesture almost that the film is called Europa. It's called Europa because the company, the sort of G4S Serco style outsourced security firm that she works for is called Europa.
Yeah.
But yeah, it actually...
And it's a story of Europe.
Very coherent. And it is a story of Europe. It's a story of two Europe.
And I wondered I was wondering, is it in dialogue at all with Lars von Trier's Europa? Maybe not. I mean, I was searching for some sorts of
I don't know if it
parallels,
is. But
I think it's in dialogue more with the filmmakers we mentioned. These kind of, I think, people like Petzold
and Jude in a way, although the filmmaker wouldn't have seen because these two films came out at the same time. But yeah, Haneke to an extent, but improves upon Haneke in my opinion. But then I'm always very, very critical of Haneke.
And it's a good story as well.
Great story. I'm going to need to change the battery of the camera, and then we have one more film to review. Maybe the review that you've been waiting for this whole episode. Occupied City by Steve McQueen.
Occupied City, yeah.
Steve McQueen's new film, Occupied City, is also at the festival. We saw it. It is 4 hours and 25 minutes, I believe. It takes the form of an essay film. So I suppose Steve McQueen has two different modes currently in his filmmaking practice. One of them is a fairly conventionally made prestige film, usually about a political historical issue, and then the other mode is a structural film for a gallery, or seeming like it should be for a gallery art piece about a political historical issue. This takes on the latter form. It is based on Steve McQueen's wife Bianca Steiger's book, which is passages of it I assume are read out.
Verbatim, I understand.
The mic on?
It's called an atlas.
Atlas, yeah. Steve McQueen lives in Amsterdam. I think his wife is Dutch. The book and the film is various scenes of Amsterdam during the long period of COVID lockdowns.
And afterwards as well.
And a bit afterwards, but it depends when, it's sort of... So is he
you lopped off his knighthood, yeah.
Really? He's got it down. Sorry, Amsterdam.
Sorry, I thought I assumed he was...
Show some respect to
I assumed his anti-colonial politics would extend to refusing, but never mind. Yes, so he's made basically... It almost resembles like Patrick Healy's London in its form of mostly, but not entirely...
But it takes no satirical approach to its subject matter. It's a very reverential,
solemn series of descriptions of locations in Amsterdam where World War II and the Holocaust took place, and anecdotes and descriptions of what places were used for and what happened in those places, while you're looking at what those places are doing now, or 2 or 3 years ago, when the film was shot. It was directed and co-produced by Steve McQueen, but the cinematography was handled by someone else, Lennart Hellig, I believe is the name, and various camera assistants. It was edited by someone else, co-edited by Steve McQueen. It was obviously written by his wife. So it's kind of a team project to an extent, but
it's an installation project because the full film exists. It's 36 hours long, and I can well imagine that maybe in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam or something, it will screen probably in its full length and full duration somewhere in a gallery somewhere. It might end up going on tour potentially. I can imagine that being the case. So there is as it were an installationary quality to it. So yeah, it's like you were saying, George. It does borrow a lot more from the realm of video art, like it's artist video or
right. But he can also go more hardcore than this. I mean, he had a piece which in Berlin last year called End Credits, which is a 12-hour loop of all of the declassified files from Paul Robeson's FBI file.
Yes, yeah,
which are sort of just made to be one continuous kind of like the credits at the end of the film.
He's got an archival approach to things. It's the observational. I think this takes
this one wasn't particularly cinematically, the one I'm describing. But yeah, I mean, we kind of carry, as we're watching this, we carry within ourselves you can imagine the 36-hour cut, really, because it's
more of the same.
I mean, I wrote down the formula as I was watching for the shots, which is find the location in which, from Bianca's book, some horrible instance of deportation or dispossession would have happened during the occupation. Now, detect within this location some sort of visual irony or
moment of sublimity sometimes.
Or a moment of levity or gaiety or life, something that shows the kind of living nature of the city, a city which is not under occupation,
but
a city
sometimes
which is...
it's banality, like these are sometimes fringe spaces and edgelines.
The portrayal of Amsterdam, by and large, is of a space of just like a kind of consummate, like adult playground, really. Like people are skiing indoors, you know, like...
a lot of these moments are moments from lockdown, which... people will remember did have these strange moments of unusualness when people were allowed to be together. You know, there would be like in Soho, people were allowed to like eat in the roads.
Al fresco.
There were these, and then
in Dutch is eat uit to
so there are various moments of like post-lockdown like release. There is a weird like. There are moments where the authoritarian nature of Gestapo and the Nazi party behavior is set against like enforcing or protest against lockdown in Amsterdam.
This is because the recipe, the structure of what I'm describing is, you know, the visual ironies are there, and then over the top, the voiceover will tell you the nature of what happened, right? So this is like a machine that's sort of set in motion, and once it's up and running, it has to run through all of these locations, and then it's sort of like incidentally, in a way that, for instance, incidentally, a CCTV capture can capture something. It kind of produces these moments that are so tonally off. But it can't...
Juxtapositions, I
don't think they're intention juxtapositions always. And I think there's moments
that kind of happens.
Just some teenagers like having a really nice time listening to some trap, and then you're hearing about like someone dying in Auschwitz.
And I think his argument is that like I think there's this kind of progressive liberal argument, which is that life goes on in all its diversity and color, and people are. There's kind of Bruegel relationship to it, you know, of these vast scenes, canvases of. Yes, it's almost like there's too much stuff. You know, you've got people skiing, and there's somebody hula hooping. You know that video that was shot in Berlin, where someone's like, Berlin is an unreal city, where there's like a guy playing a trumpet
outside the Academy de Kunst. Every nonsense.
Every kind of silly nonsense thing is happening. But I think so with the film itself, it was not what I expected. So I think because the obvious visual corollary you reach for maybe is someone like James Benning, you know, the Ur kind of is still very active landscape structural filmmaker.
It's not that at all, no.
It's not. I was expecting a static camera on these places, and then it starts off with a static shot of a corridor.
It establishes some rules and then breaks it.
Yeah, a few seconds, then we've got this pan, and it follows this woman around. I'm like, maybe suddenly this is a lot less interesting. And what I found with the shot selection, some of it was very uneven. I think that reflects probably the duration of the project and maybe different camera assistants working on it and maybe availability of where they were allowed to shoot. But some of the shots were they were like a kind of BBC News report, you know, B-roll for a BBC News report of people on the street. Other times they would show real inventiveness. You know, there's a great scene of shooting up the mast of a wind turbine in the mist. You've got real moments of real kind of strangeness and beauty, and then some of them will just feel. I mean,
there are some moments that are so there are some sequences in this that are like some of the most spectacular things I've seen from a British filmmaker.
I know which ones you're relating to.
So, for instance, I think we'd all agree that there's this sledding sequence, which is I think you're referring to a Bruegel reference, which is, you know, it's Tarkovsky, and I mean it's gorgeous.
It's watching these kids pulling themselves up,
and there he actually has the sensitivity to do what, unfortunately, maybe the structure of the film doesn't allow, or the conceit of the film won't allow, which is the voice recedes, you know, and you know. And here again, we have the point about crediting your audience with the intelligence to kind of reflect. You know? It's not like we're suddenly going to forget. You know, we've been hearing about. We understand, but we can also kind of this can be allowed to rest and dwell, and we can savor this truly exquisite piece of cinematography.
Really
with this kind of like
joyful.
golden hour, and great depth of field. I mean, it's amazing.
But my problem is that McQueen doesn't seem particularly bothered about the things that make this film good. And I think, and this is at the point at which
they
I feel like
almost unintentionally.
I think he's hired good cinematographers or a good cinematographer and camera assistants who are being creative in various ways, and then.
But they're not driving they're not in the driving seat.
No,
yeah.
no and so that in that sense, you have moments like that are very profound, set against moments which are trying to be very profound and aren't. You know, and then you have these moments that feel. I mean, the one thing that did occur to me during it was actually, you know, those TikToks where you have someone explaining an idea, and then in one corner of the frame you have someone like someone like a video game, someone jumping over things like
plasticine being perfectly cut into little circles.
Exactly. There's actually a scene where someone is like using paint. God, it's been a long day. Painting the road with white paint, painting a road sign in the road.
Oh, it's like a satisfaction.
And a
ASMR
sort of
thing,
satisfaction ASMR vibe. While the voiceover, this very beautiful Melanie Hyams. She's just on Mandy. She's just a woman who speaks Dutch and English very well. This woman like reads out this horrific story about. It
was quite. Anne Frank. I think it was useful, interesting, you know, because sometimes with projects like this, you either get a sort of celebrity voiceover. You know, you get Tilda Swinton and stuff, voiceovers, or you get someone with a kind of authoritative English, you know, senior voice. But going for a young woman was quite pointed. I
totally disagree. I was thinking about this. Is that
I didn't mind it at first. It irritated
post
me.
Marker, right? So post Chris Marker, especially in the art world, you know, especially if you think about something like forensic architecture's work or something like this, the bland, affectless female English voice is now the equivalent of the plummy voice that you would have on on a newsreel from the 1930s, being like, "Our boys today have gone over the truth." It is it's made to represent the voice supposed to know, the kind of voice of authority, the voice that we implicitly trust.
But it was an intentionally youthful voice as well. It was more youthful.
I really thought it was completely shorn of any distinctive traits whatsoever, and I found that already a little bit sus, because. The status of the voiceover in this film is a problem, because I don't think it was sufficiently interrogated by him. What will happen over the duration of this film is that inevitably you will start to tune out of what you're being told, and you will start to, and you will be within this, as you are within many video essays, this kind of push and pull between the image and the sound, especially when they're two discrete parallel tracks like this. But when they become so divergent. Then of necessity you're going to tune out, and at that moment there will be some sort of guilt reflex. Perhaps that's what's trying to be thematized, but it becomes like like a radio.
Well, that's how it's received in positive reviews,
right?
So it makes us question like
our attentiveness and our relationship.
But actually, what it seemed to me is a sort of like history is a nightmare from which I'm trying to wake up. This kind of encyclopedic approach to making work about the show, where you feel that the only way to approach the enormity of the subject is to make something so, likewise so gargantuan, so encyclopedic, so indexical, so categorical that you can exhaust it. But of course you can't. I mean, that to me is that is actually a pretty superficial a way to approach it. I mean, Paul Celan in like 15 lines of Todesfuge probably manages to make a more kind of deeply felt and responsive thing than this, like these gargantuan exhaustive things like Landsman's Shower or something like this.
His project ultimately is one of he is exploring a kind of dissonance, but maybe not in the most interesting way he could have done. It wasn't taken to its extreme, and I feel like there were points where this juxtaposition, or not juxtaposition, but there was a clash between image and what you're being told. There were certain points where it was quite difficult to discern her voiceover because of the background sound in the mix. There are other times where I know a few times where there was so much clatter, noise, and kind of hubbub.
I generally thought she was actually too high in the mix, but
she was at times. Like it was very loud when the scene was quiet, but when the scene was louder,
the level I wanted her voice in the mix was sort of
slightly lower,
sort of 0.
Off.
I mean, a more powerful film would have been just static shots of these.
But that film was Benning can come back into a conversation here, because he made a film called American Dreams. You seen this one with the baseball cards?
I've not seen American Dreams,
it is again a parallel tracks essay film. It's shorter and much smaller budget, but it's a bunch of it's his pretty enormous sticker collection of baseball cards from the 50s. But meanwhile, in parallel, he's telling a story about the racial injustice suffered by baseball players since its kind of inception as a sport. But there, it's directly thematized that this is sort of like a radio droning on. That you can kind of tune in and out of.
Yeah, because of course the parallel we can think about is Allensworth, which is a discursive political film about sort of racial segregation in America and liberation in the sort of early part of the 20th century. And this film is pursuing a similar project where we're being invited to look at a space now while being told about how it was lived in the lived reality of that space in the past.
But the nature of Allensworth, and I did have my qualm with Allen. I liked Allensworth. My qualm with it was that it had this political dimension, it rose above the surface of the structural
weren't
film
always
form.
flush, were they?
Yeah. And no, I like the fact that things drifted out, but there was this sense of telling you to juxtapose things. But this commits that crime much more severely. This film by McQueen, and I think it's symptomatic of McQueen's general tendency, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I think Allensworth has the content of Allensworth
tendencies.
Yeah, the content of the Allensworth, and we reviewed it on the pod. You can listen to it, and it's showing at London Film Festival. The nature of it is that you can just your overriding experience is still of duration. It's still of these places, viewing these places and experiencing these places, and therefore having some kind of transcendent experience.
And it allows sufficient space for thoughts to occur.
Exactly.
Right? And so
this film never does.
There is such clutter, both auditory and visual, that you're sort of suffused, you're clamoured upon. And then it's interesting because the film also incorporates. I was thinking about the Steppenstoppen, which are these kind of brass plaques, which was initially the project of just one guy, this kind of Stakhanovite life work, in which he tracked down, using publicly available information, houses where people had where Jews who lived there have been deported, and these plaques are put just a centimetre above the ground so that you kind of trip over them. That's the idea, right? And there's a scene where we see some of these being installed.
Nightmare for the local council.
But I don't know. I feel like that already was a sort of admission of its own failure.
So if it hadn't had the voiceover, it would have basically been a Piavilli style.
It would have been an extraordinary symphonic
a city symphony
to a city undergoing an experience of quite dramatic reawakening from an artificial slumber during lockdown.
But it would have been too long.
Who knows? Maybe it was that film to begin with.
It might have been, yeah.
No, but it was based on his wife's book. It must
the locations.
It must have started with the
But I think
idea.
he was obviously sufficiently distracted with this narrative of lockdown, because it begins to tell a story about COVID and the COVID response and the experience of living under COVID in a way that is oftentimes, I think, disarms the narrative that he's really telling, which is this Holocaust narrative. So it seems at times like McQueen becomes a little bit more interested in telling the story about the kind of political ramifications and the lived.
But it doesn't drift. It doesn't quite drift into kind of anti-lockdown comparison, which it could easily do, right?
No, we could provide ballast if somebody wants to do a supercut like that.
True.
But every shot seems to tell us that these people are oblivious to the dark past in the location that they're in.
Is it condemning the subject, or is it celebrating their freedom?
Well, that's where it started to make me think of this. I know you saw Sergei Loznitsa's Austerlitz, right? So this is the film that he made about Auschwitz tourism, and there isn't this kind of didactic, overdetermining voiceover, but the visual ironies are what kind of provides the sucker of the content.
Was it Holocaust as well, the other art project?
Holocaust. You only live once.
Everybody at the Holocaust Memorial site in Berlin.
So he'd superimpose images of people on the on the site against Holocaust.
I mean, in a way, it's a cheap gag. But what I felt that Loznitsa was doing effectively was, by the end of this film, he was saying okay, but what is the proper way that somebody should conduct themselves in a site of, mass murder?
This film isn't asking that, though.
No, this film isn't asking this, but it is. I think it's.
I think this film is saying the way you properly memorialize it is to write a book and to make a film about the Holocaust
and to list the names. It has this. It very much verifies, approves of the most solemn and exhaustive and lexical, as you say, modes of commemoration. And this may be a good moment for my Steve McQueen rant. Because
can we
talk about the sequence we all absolutely loved?
There was a great
before we
sequence.
indemnify it, like the one which is just like a visionary 10 minutes, and if that had been the film, we'd be like,
so there's a section where we are on a vehicle, and there's a camera on a kind of gimbal rig that basically swoops and swerves in a way that's very familiar. Maybe
on
it's
a tram as well, maybe because it's moving quite far.
It's moving quite fast. No, it's not on tram tracks. It's on a road. But so this scene it kind of invokes precedents like Michael Snow's Region Central with this kind of robotic, oscillating, robotic swooping arm. The music that's played over top is Michael Levy.
It's Baroque Maine, which is made.
It sounded like
Baroque. It's a Baroque allegations.
It sounded kind of Michael Levy.
No, but it's Mika Levy and Oliver Coates together. It's a track that they've released together called Baroque brackets Maine. But the reason I bring it up is because Oliver Coates, apart from all the incidental bits of trap playing off people's phone in the film, it's scored in a much less interesting way.
Pretty conventional.
By Oliver Coates, who did music for After Sun and who's also an independent musician.
But I felt that the music there was completely a key with this. It had this kind of dissonant straining at the edge of some keys.
And it really let itself wig out. And it kind of seemed to me to then be in discourse with, Dutch filmmaking has this documentary-wise and city symphony-wise. Joris Evans made this beautiful film called Reagan, and it was also... It's an early, late 20s experimental Dutch film, and it seemed to be channeling the spirit of that.
Well, it was
this kind of haunted, empty city also was perfectly dramatized. Whereas towards the end, it started to really indulge fairly conventional social documentary photography style portrayals of the boarded up city with the graffiti. We've seen all of this. I mean,
the City Symphony is such an established part of film tradition in a way, and it's kind of a lost art in some capacities. So Berlin was the first great.
It's been given over to kind of heritage.
I did love the color and the fact that it was in 4:3.
It was not as wide as it could have been.
It had a strong start on that regard, and there was this. I assume it was shot on fairly portable digital cameras. I'm not sure, but it was just very it was nice to see. I had initially assumed that it was just shot by him, on a tripod going around.
I assumed that.
Then I was a bit disappointed to learn that there was this whole crew behind it. So that
I suppose that the vastness of the project, known as a 36-hour version,
and there are moments
against that.
There are moments where he's filming in places where he'd obviously have to get permission. I quite like the idea that he says to people like his producer would say Steve McQueen, who won an Oscar, do
you want to be in this film?
Can we film this? It's kind of
there's an interesting scene. So there's a question about staging. So obviously crowd scenes, and there's some elements that have a kind of newsreel footage, like when we see a kind of COVID demonstration kind of pop off and the police response.
Reminded me of Germany in Autumn. The funeral of Hans Meyer and Schleyer.
Schleyer.
Not Schleyer, the funeral of the terrorists.
Of the RAF. Meinhof gang. So we're just saying words now. But there's a scene where we see there's actually two things before you go on your proper rant. There's two things I want to mention I find very funny. The first one is the scene where we see presumably the Netherlands Prime Minister announced lockdown in a way that, So that scene feels very opposite. It's shot in a kind of looks like a kebab joint or something. So is that, I presume, did McQueen's producers know that an announcement was made at a particular time, chose a location,
definitely
assumed, or was that restaged later?
Oh God!
I wonder the push and pull between the kind of staged and the kind of live and organic.
I mean, it's funded. It's obviously well funded. There's lots of logos at the start. I mean, it was obviously a grander project than it probably would have needed to be if you were an indie filmmaker. This feels like a film you could probably make without any permission, without any producers. You literally could, if you just have a camera and a tripod, you could do it.
And that's often won't challenge you.
Yeah, it's annoying when someone with lots of money makes something that.
Imagine a release form
that someone with no money could make, but doesn't do it in an interesting way. It doesn't flex. But anyway,
the other thing I'll talk about quickly is I broke into such a wide smile every time I saw the big lumbering fatso of the Dutch king arrive. He's such a large kind of sort of inbred looking man.
Lumpen aristocracy we deserve, sort of.
The other source of unintended mirth was this refrain destroyed. It was necessary.
Which became increasingly frequent towards the end.
Demolished.
And I have my take on this is that
can I just explain to listeners what it is?
Sorry.
So so there's 130 locations announced, and obviously some of those locations since the 1940s no longer exist. And so when that is the case,
most of them, I would say, in this case,
it happened a lot. The voiceover announces at the end of the anecdote or the section of voiceover, she says, destroyed or partially destroyed sometimes.
Demolished, partially demolished.
Demolished. Yeah. Demolished, partly demolished. And it was another way in which the film just didn't have a sense of humor because it was dealing with such a solemn subject. It didn't think to understand itself as having this like weird.
And once again, it's an underestimation of the viewer's intelligence because it's also a protestation against the like task that the film has set itself. Because every time it's showing you this thing, we know we're not looking
at H&M.
We're looking at a fucking shopping centre made in 2004. We know we're not looking at the reclamation centre.
And it's kind of obvious when we're in a flat and the flat has features that make it align.
So what's it doing?
Because what a film is trying to do is run the past through the present along these kind of even grooves, and there are times when it's able to smoothly do this. I mean, there is one very affecting sequence, I think, when it all calms down a bit visually, and we concentrate on some shadows on the side of a wall, and we're told about. You remember this part when we're told about how somebody's neighbor informed on them from the second floor, and this was a moment where I really felt okay. Now it's found it's somehow managed to entangle the two parts of this film, and then it just loosely went off again.
Yeah,
and we
found
have this
a moment
wedding
of congruence between the
but then we immediately
wedding.
succeeded by the lesbian wedding, which was just so tonally off. And then you realize that actually the moments where the film succeeds are like a happy fluke.
Because it's so long that there is like room enough for flukes. It's it extends.
Yeah, I think this is So actually, what's more interesting are these moments of congruence rather than dissonance. It's quite easy to achieve ironic distance and kind of dissonance in this film to capture moments of real congruence between the moment being told and the space as it's unfolding now. Those are more interesting to me, like you said, with the shadows, I think. And there are a few instances of that, when we see these mist-wrapped banks of the river where, with a lone man walking his dog through them, when we're told about this is where people were brought and executed. There's a kind of like congruence between the experience
it's fine
there. He's
to choose an image
across.
that is light.
And what I wanted was a sense of actually a character, a bit like what Patrick Keeler achieved so well in London, like a sense of a character emerging, which did sometimes happen, but then it would just do something that completely
I guess
undermined it.
The city is the character.
But like there's something about the when you're doing something like that, the camera has to take on this personality,
which it did for the moment that we're talking about.
Sometimes,
where it autonomized itself.
It became Brodsky's independent, autonomous eye, didn't it? And began to float through the city.
The camera eye.
The camera eye, and it's like, Brodsky and Vertov and everyone.
Steve McQueen, Sir Steve McQueen. My contention is I think that he is actually a deeply self-important filmmaker / artist. As I said earlier, he divides his work between two quite different forms. One is like Small Axe, 12 Years a Slave, these very slickly made commercial dramas that deal with important political issues that have an atmosphere of like rubbing your face in it and telling you this happened, it's really important, you know that this happened. And these art pieces or structural films or essay films, like the Grenfell piece at Serpentine, which I saw recently, which was a 23-minute drone shot that kind of arrived at Kensington, circled the building sort of 8 months after it had been after it had burned.
Burnt husk at this
so
point,
it was being like, but builders were kind of dealing with it. Circles the drone, gets quite close to it, then moves out, and then you walk out of the gallery, and then you have to look at a list of the names of the people who died in Grenfell, which is a very competently made and engaging structural film, which then rams down your throat at the end that like this is about something important and you should know this and this should be remembered. This film manages to be more obnoxious than that because it does the structural film elements. It has like moments of beauty, but then it's constantly layered, as we've said, with the itemization, the indexing of the tragedy that it's ramming down your throat happened and you must know. And I think that he, as a theme is emerging in our discussion, he underestimates the intelligence of the audience massively. The way that he tells, and I think it engenders a liberal sensibility. It is kind of white fragility style approach he has to filmmaking, which is you must be educated.
He chooses to shoot. So in a park, there's a celebration of kind of African diaspora communities. He chooses a lesbian wedding, and fine. I'm sure Amsterdam is a relatively diverse city, but is it? It kind of gives this narrative of this kind of cosmopolitan cornucopia in a way. And I wonder if Amsterdam having a very live tradition of far right political
Amsterdam is definitely diverse. There's like huge Suriname.
It's true. He doesn't go to the north.
But the Netherlands as a whole is a country that's really like tussled with the far right. They've been very prominent through the 90s and the 2000s. And I think
they have these weird racist traditions.
Right. It's a film that doesn't want to admit the recrudescence of fascism in their own moment.
I think it does want to gesture towards it. Right. There's like a shot. There's like a memorial to this journalist that was killed. There's like this anti-fascist rally where this guy sings a guitar song that's called "No More Fascism," and he just sings "No More Fascism." It definitely wants to signal politics all the time and make you think. And as we say, one must not confuse intention with reception. But Peter Bradshaw's review of it says in the stand first, this is a film that causes you to question things, to make things.
I'm not sure it does.
It didn't trigger for me any profound political realizations. Anyone with a vaguest familiarity with 20th century European politics is fully aware the Holocaust happened. We all know like horrific details about how it was enacted.
No, but I'm not going to unveil against somebody making a film about that. Thematically, it's not on an interesting topic
to talk about.
But it's the solemnity, the mission engenders that solemnity. The mission approach that he has.
But my problem is actually not. It's tonally. It was confused.
That's what I mean. The solemnity causes this tonal confusion,
right?
Because he's structure. He's got a structure in place that naturally gives rise to moments of joy and humor and weirdness. But then he insists against it with this completely humorless verbal,
which is a lack of bravery. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a sort of form of cinematic cowardice.
But people will applaud it because of the noble aims. It's a film that talks about what a profound film would be.
It underlines itself, basically.
But
it's
it isn't a profound film.
And it's underlining itself, and it's trying to ramify. It's trying to ramify basically the things that are already being said formally, but in the language of the film and the grammar of the film, we get it. And I think you're right as well. I think one of the other frustrations was his desire for coverage on certain shots. So there'll be certain locations that we reach, and it'll cut to a slightly different shot or a different angle in that space, and it's trying to give us for no other. The interesting thing is when he holds a shot and he sustains a shot, like this scene with everybody snow, sort of gliding down the slope.
Or the beautiful one of the tulips in the foreground and the teenage lovers in the back.
Moving in the back, and they're just
really
stroking each other.
So
incredibly beautiful because he takes
and the
that
dancing,
lesson from
the scene. A lot of these would have been beautiful moving image works. And what upsets me is the fact that seems to be no longer any room for someone to just make a beautiful experimental film that that fixates on a thing and shows it in a very arresting way, and that's all it does. And Steve McQueen is just utterly symptomatic of the way that moving image culture, the place that moving image culture has arrived at now.
The image is entirely subtended.
And if you look at the experimental strand, I used to, in 2014, I watched every single screening in the experimenter program of LFF, and I saw some extraordinary works, and I was really given an education into what moving image culture is, because there was archive screenings as well. This time I haven't even touched the experimenter strand, because every film in this strand you'll have seen from the program is just a film about telling you about politics that may have been made in a slightly
it's a
quirky,
film
unusual
story,
way,
which is something we've talked about previously. And I think as well, there is that LFF, I know we're going to sort of institutional critique now, but there is an expanded cinema strand to LFF, crazy. Which is just
not expanded cinema in the Malcolm LeGros sense.
Ludicrous.
Yeah, it's VR bullshit.
It's Guy Madden doing some nonsense with some 3D cameras.
Not that I'm trying
anyway,
to send people
we must wrap up, because you guys
are getting cantankerous, we're getting curmudgeonly.
We are. There were moments of real lucidity and beauty in it, and I think the film. I think you're right. There were moments almost unintentionally, organically of coincidence that made it very beautiful.
Or I think a product of the crew he was working with rather than his own intentions.
Yeah, like the scene with the car, at night. You wonder how much that was directed, or if that was more of a kind of because it didn't fit with the rest of the film. It felt more like an interlude, and you kind of wonder if they're
it did come almost around the halfway point as well. Yeah,
I thought that was the interlude that he said you shouldn't leave the film during. he said you should sit through the interlude. That's
Oh,
what he
really?
said.
Did Steve McQueen say
Did we
this?
defy him by leaving?
Yeah, we defied it by going
Such
to get
a fucking annoying person.
I'm sorry, what were we
sandwich.
meant to do? We were meant to just sit there and
And
reflect.
15 minutes
And reflect on-
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. Steve McQueen's aesthetic project is just forcing you to hear like nasty stuff that's happened and reflect and do the work. He is just like
He's
a
the
fucking
most do the work
He's
guy.
he's a fucking liberal. His work is not liberating. It's not interesting. It's just making you suffer in the name of like.
Do you know what it is?
Political understanding.
Do the work thing.
Yeah, it is. It's that.
Do the work.
And occasionally, as a
I got it,
byproduct of these structures that he has to create in order to do this, he sometimes as a result of working with interesting and talented people, like makes something that's actually visually
I
beautiful
don't
and
know. I
engaging.
think Shame was a decent film.
Okay, I haven't seen Shame, and I think Hunger was okay.
Shame. You'd like Shame. Shame was a good film.
But from 12 years onwards, I didn't see the fourth one. He made the Widows one, but like, yeah. In the
I like
main,
Shame.
when he's dealing with oscillating between these two modes, I find him insufferable.
So I don't have such an animus against it. I just think it was a fairly uninspired approach to probably, like to a topic that is not devoid of. It literally has to provoke new ways of thinking about cinema because, right? I mean, you're talking about documenting something for which the traces have, by and large, been forcibly removed either through a process of physical extermination of the people or of the sites, and insufficient. And you see the inadequacy of all of existing architectural forms.
Karen Farocki reflected quite well.
Literally, and that's how you see it. That's how you see the same material. Given form, given expression to by somebody who's like actually intelligently reflecting on the processes that might have produced fascism.
Yeah, I mean,
whereas the liberal mindset cannot actually conceive of it because by and large they were complicit.
Yeah. And you might actually say a generous reading might be that this.
No, I don't mean Steve
a
McQueen was. You know what I mean? But like the sort of mentality that produces. Something like this film.
This is what I'm saying. I think there's a generous reading. Is this film is a machine that generates potentially more interesting readings. Like there's unintended ghost images of this film. One of which is like a kind of slightly satirical, pointed critique of the kind of inadequacy and the kind of mundanity of modern urban development, like modern urbanism. Because a lot of the spaces we see are just non-placey, insipid, crowded, hyper-capitalist shopping markets. We kind of get a kind of critique of urban development in this film.
Yeah, and you do
while
feel
hearing
the sort
about
of emptiness, the vacuity of lots of these.
Well, we hear about we hear about composers and string quartets and artists and painters in the past who have now been, were murdered during the course of the war. We hear,
and instead we're watching. Well, I mean, we're watching kind of teenagers have avocado toast. Yeah.
So hopefully we will have a more interesting and engaging and arresting experience with a different reflection on the Holocaust by Jonathan Glazer, also by British director Jonathan Glazer's Zone of Interest is going to be screening on Wednesday. We will watch that and we will talk about that film, and we will talk about
I'm seeing it on Friday.
Close Your Eye. Okay, we're seeing the things at different times.
We are.
But in a week or so we will return to form to discuss.
I'm optimistic about the Glazer.
I'm optimistic about the Victor Erice and the new Pedro Costa short 9 minutes. And we're also going to see How to Have Sex for Our Sins, or who knows, maybe you've always got to keep open mind to a British film being all right.
Sounds like it could be useful.
The persistence of hope
in
the dark place.
Hope not cope, that's the motto at Return to Form. George, thank you so much for joining us and providing very erudite insights as ever. We have talked for 2.5 hours. Longer, not as long as Steve McQueen's Occupied City, but long enough.
This is the Occupied Settee.
Exactly.
Very good.
And now we're about to see another 3.5 hour clunker, I think, which is Wang Bing's Youth.
We're going to come out of it slightly less youthful.
Slightly 3 hours older.
I'm not getting involved in this pursuit, but I wish you all the best and look forward to hearing about it on the next pod. Thank you for listening and watching, listeners. Peace.
Peace out.